across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Fast approaching 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or watching on YouTube, great to have your company. Thank you very much indeed. I'm with you live until 1. If you miss anything from the show, missed anything from yesterday, do go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. If you did miss my interview with Charlie Downs, senior figure with the Restore Party, that was fun. Definitely going to get him on again. We've got a bit more time. But I had a delightful time on social media being told I'm a traitor to my race by ethno-nationalists. So that was fun. I'd just like to apologise to everybody. I'm really, really, really sorry for what I said in that interview. I'm really sorry that my parents raised me not to be a racist. It was obviously a terrible affliction on my part and their part, and I can only apologise to you, but sorry, not. Anyway, coming up in this hour, we are going to be discussing how the official guidance on single-sex spaces, such as loos and changing rooms, comes into force today. But, one Green Council, what a surprise, in London is saying, no, we're not going to obey the law. Yeah, well, then you should probably end up being prosecuted, shouldn't you? It's very, very simple. We're also going to talk about Kemi Badenoch defending the selection of a former neo-Nazi jailed for inciting racist hatred against Luciana Berger, now a Labour peer, and others, as a Conservative council candidate. I mean, I believe in redemption, but is this the right decision? Is this the battle to fight, Kemi Badenoch? Love to hear your thoughts on that. Also, Labour's plan to give 16 and 17-year-olds the vote could result in a surge of, imagine everyone's surprised, Gaza independent candidates winning at the next election. I wonder if Labour will backtrack on that, and more than 9,000 domestic abusers are set to walk Britain's streets within 3 years under Labour's early prison release scheme. By the way, they have a very high rate of reoffending. In terms of convictions, you're looking around the 25-30%. So like 1 in 4, almost 1 in 3 will go on to be convicted in the next few years of a domestic abuse event. It's almost like they should probably stay behind bars as long as possible, isn't it? Funny that. But remember, Andy Burnham is doing his best. Anyway, all that coming up, plenty more besides, including these just the latest extraordinary stories involving the Walter Mitty character that is this Cambridge professor, Jason Arday, and plenty more besides that. And all of it to be discussed with Conservative commentator Benedict Spence. Morning to you.
Hello, race traitor. How are you?
Yes, hello. That's my new job title, race traitor. Yeah. I genuinely feel sorry for these people. I really do. I feel sorry for the people who are victims of their views. But there we are. No, sorry. Just really don't care about the colour of people's skin in any direction. It's just irrelevant. Doesn't make me behave in a certain way. Doesn't make colour of
That's not true, Julia. You're often telling me I look far too pasty and need to get in the sun.
You do look pasty.
Yes,
just put some fake.
You see already, your whole defence is unravelling.
My whole defence is unravelling. So much to talk about. Now look. And I say this every day because I do mean it every day. You can call in about whatever you want to call in about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. And you're welcome to call in about the single-sex space. It's just I do think that actually our audience are too sensible to... I mean, it is, as I was saying earlier, it's an August silly season story, isn't it? Oh, apparently men aren't supposed to go to women's toilets. I mean... blow me down. Oh, by the way, they were never allowed to. Everyone's been acting illegally by allowing that. But I do want to ask people specifically about this Kemi Badenoch story, because it is about Kemi Badenoch and her judgment, defending the Tory selecting as a council candidate a man who was jailed for neo-Nazi activism not that long ago, not like sort of 20 years ago, saying he's reformed, he now campaigns against extremism, we believe in second chances. What's your reaction to that? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs 1 standard network rate message. But as always, your thoughts on all the other topics, very, very, very much appreciated. Let's start, though, with this new guidance on single-sex spaces. 16 months. 16 months. I mean, these people... I've got quite slow typing. These people are really bad at typing. They've written a 342-page code at the Equality and Human Rights Commission. It was written quite some time ago, of course it was. It's taken 60 months since that Supreme Court ruling that made it really clear what we already knew already and what 3-year-olds know, which is that women are women and men are men, and it's based on biological sex, not what you think on a Wednesday afternoon. But they have basically said that single-sex spaces, like toilets and changing rooms, and single-sex things like sport, should be organised based on biological sex. That's the now official guidance that comes into force today across the country. trans rights campaigners have called the guidance unworkable, hilariously. So men not going into women's toilets or changing rooms, and women not going into men's toilets changing, unless there's a really big queue for the ladies' loo at a nightclub, by the way. You know that's what happens. That is unworkable, despite the fact it was and has been the law all along, and did work and does work everywhere and has done for decades.
Yeah, the use of the word unworkable is the curious thing, because as you say...
How are you going to police it?
It's actually really obvious how it works, which is that if you have a todger, you go into one, and if you don't, you go into the other. What this actually means when they say unworkable is that they're not going to go along with it, because when they say unworkable, they mean that they're going to just do what they want. And this has been largely the problem since the get-go, which is that a lot of people feel entitled to behave a certain way. The irony is a lot of these people are men, born men, who then say that they're women.
Not born men.
But,
no, you don't say that.
Well, you say that, but they might have cut something off, in which case I don't know what they are. No, there's something in between. There's something very
No,
odd.
they're not. They're just a man without a todger.
They're absolutely something in between. There's something else. Yeah, if you're a man and you actively want to go out and cut your todger off, I would say actually you don't then cut... Men like their todgers. They like to keep a hold of them. If you don't want that, that's something else. I'm sorry, that's a separate category.
I feel we're now on a different show entirely.
I'm sorry, you want to reject these people. I don't have to take them back. They can go somewhere else. Yeah, ultimately, I'm standing up for men's rights here and saying absolutely not. But, as it happens, they are going to go into the men's bathrooms, but they behave like men. This is the key thing. This entitlement is very masculine behaviour, and it's always the irony that I thought of this thing, is that these people who say that they are women continue to live their lives as if they are men. The only difference is they're wearing a skirt, if we're lucky. And often, frankly, that's a pretty unlucky thing to come across. It is entirely workable. It's entirely obvious how this is
has
going to
worked
go.
for many, many
decades. They simply don't want to, because they are being effectively indulged.
The thing is, this applies to public toilets, domestic violence shelters, obviously, applies to leisure centres, cafes, and many more. But basically, you know, there's no room for confusion. This is what the law always. This is what the law always was. Where appropriate and where possible, there can be a unisex provision for trans people, trans-identified people. Because no one is actually trans. There are people who just identify as trans. They might believe they are genuinely, they might pretend they believe they are, but they're not actually trans. You are only born in the body you are in, and that is your biological sex. End of. Nothing to discuss. But you know, so you could. I mean, again. Disabled toilets are available, and they are largely unisex, aren't they? Yes. So you get men's and a women's, and you get the disabled toilet. It can be the disabled, you know, easy access and unisex toilet, which of course is what people who if they're uncomfortable going into either, they can use. Yeah. I just don't see what's complicated about that. But what is fascinating is this whole idea that councils like Lambeth Council, now run by the Greens, again. The people of Lambeth, if you want to vote in the Greens to run your local council, you live with the consequences. And they backed a motion at a full council meeting last month calling on it to refuse to implement the code. They condemned the code as incoherent. This is hilarious. The code saying men should use men's toilets and women should use women's toilets is incoherent, self-contradictory, no, discriminatory, yes. Discrimination where it's appropriate is appropriate, and impossible to implement in a reasonable and proportionate manner. I mean, it literally was always the law. And asked officers to advise on the legality of non-implementation, proceed with non-implementation, should officers advise this is a lawful option. It's not a lawful option, that is the law, but also any council officer who does not implement it must be prosecuted and must be sacked. Because you cannot have people paid by the public purse who openly defy the law.
We're getting this strange thing. We had this actually with another council in London. I think it was the neighbouring one. I can't remember which one it was, but that was to do with migrants and refugees, saying we're not going to cooperate with the authorities when it comes to people sort of being rounded up and deported because they are in the country illegally. We're actively going to resist this.
Well, that's what happened in American states.
And you do have to say, I'm sorry, but, you know, you're not some revolutionary. You are just a councillor in Hackney or wherever it is. Your remit is bins and things like that. It's not, in fact, the great struggle against the evil, oppressive, democratically elected government of this country. And yes, you're right. Actually, until actual national authorities crack down on these people and say, I don't know what you're playing at, but you're not fit for public office, and actually you've broken the law, so you're going off to prison. Until we get to that point, they're going to keep behaving like this.
If trans-identified people, trans activists, they want to campaign to get their own toilets, that's absolutely fine. I mean, I really, you know, fill your boots, I don't care, but you're not having mine.
I'm not even
That's
okay
it.
with that, because that'll cost me money as a taxpayer.
Well, and this is the thing. It was reported earlier last month, tens of millions of pounds are going to have to be spent revamping 13,000 toilets, 5,000 change rooms across Britain, so they're compliant with new guidance. But again, it's new guidance, but compliant with the law as it always was. At least 18,000 signs will need changing in gyms and hospitals, town halls and leisure centres. I mean, you've got to remember also, by the way, if your kid's school has, like, gender-neutral toilets, that's illegal. OK, you really, really, really need to be speaking up on this stuff, guys. I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Look, if you are trans-identified, you listen to the show and you genuinely believe this is unworkable, you're one of those lunatic liberal people with your lanyard. I'm assuming you're wearing your lanyard. This building is full of people on other floors, I'd like to point out, wearing they're still wearing their pride lanyards. The trans, but they wear the trans pride lanyard.
Once again, TalkSport really has gone down the drain. Very odd place.
They're on the same floor as us. Not
I'm just smearing them.
But it is just like, I really object to that flag. I consider it to be a homophobic, misogynistic and actually racist flag, the Black Lives Matter bit being in it. We think, it's not Black Lives Matter now. That's when it was put in. I mean, if you want to call in and you want to tell me why you think this isn't workable, feel free. But I mean, a lot of these places, it's like pubs and places like that, and they've the law. I mean, I've worked in enough pubs and bars over the years and restaurants. We never had an issue. It was very, very clear. If a bloke walked into the women's toilet, someone would have a say about it. But there is a concern about that women are being left to police this. But that was kind of always the case. Get out.
Yeah.
But I want to be able to say, get out, without someone then arresting me for being transphobic.
I mean, there's a lot of irony with that, which is that, certainly for men of my generation, we went through the experience of having to deal with a certain wave of feminists that insisted that men had no right to talk about women's issues, and then promptly moved on to the "are trans people women" thing, and couldn't agree amongst themselves. And then those women turn around and go, why aren't the men speaking up? To which the response from a lot of men is, well, you told us not to. So what do you want? Actually, please just make your minds up. Are men evil and oppressive, or do you need us to assist you at some point?
Very, very, very strange kind of feminism, that is not one I stand up to. Let's also talk about this policy of early release from prison. It's now been revealed, we know it's now going to happen in October, not in September. Oh, well, that's a massive difference. Thanks, Andy Burnham. I assume that's so he's got time to get back from his holiday. But we've got not only police who are furious about the killers of Andrew Harper, being released early. They say they will not stop, they'll take legal action. The law is very, very clear. Under the law of this early release scheme, people who convicted of manslaughter, 2 of his killers, 1 murder, they will be released. Now, Kemi Badenoch was making it clear on the radio this morning that, they could actually, there could be an easy change in the law. You wouldn't need to recall Parliament, which would exempt people who kill police officers or other public servants in the course of their duty, would be easy to do. I'm not so sure. I mean, I just don't think any people... There are 1,000 men behind bars for manslaughter, and only a fraction of them will be released under this scheme because they're eligible, halfway through their sentence. I'm sorry. I just don't see for any reason at all why any of them need to be released. Simply because they're not going to they don't make up a great number of people. But over 9,000 domestic abusers are going to be released early. And that's over the next few years. 3,000 perpetrators to be freed annually before serving their full sentences. Bearing in mind they'd only have served 2/3 anyway, now it's going to be a half. But we're told, rapists won't be released, child sex groomers, paedophiles and the like. But men who have beaten and strangled and terrified and harass their girlfriends and wives, that is going to be allowed. Now, the reoffending rate for domestic abusers is pretty darn high. Now, it depends how you rank it, but in terms of actual convictions in the next 3 to 5 years, we're looking at around 1 in 3. One in 4, 1 in 3 getting convicted. Now, I'm sorry, OK, I know, like, petty thieves are doing it again, but they're going back to the same victim, normally. These are particularly dangerous crimes. If a woman is killed, the first person you should look at is her husband, her boyfriend, or her recent ex. That's statistically who's going to kill a woman, OK? These men are a danger to these women and their children. And it's just extra. I mean, I don't know where they drew the line. Like, so you killed someone, or you battered your wife or your girlfriend black and blue, terrified the living daylights out and threatened her. But if you rape someone, you don't have to get let out. I'm sorry.
We have to bear in mind here, of course, that in many cases, people who are put behind bars for domestic abuse, stalking, this sort of thing, only go behind bars because very bravely their victims actually go to the police. So what do you think those people might end up doing when they're released early, they might go out looking for revenge against the person that dared to speak up to them, dared to stop them from being that kind of a person. And yeah, you're right, actually. There are certain crimes that you can always see the pattern. I say always, often see the pattern.
Yeah.
Another one is people who are, torture and kill animals. There's such a, clear pattern between that and harming people that when you see actually pretty lenient sentences for them, you go, what on earth are we thinking? And then we're told it's to do with proportionality. You should be disproportionate to these people to prevent them from reoffending, which we know statistically they're likely to do. And I must just say, whilst Kemi Badenoch may be point scoring on the issue around manslaughter of police officers and other emergency workers, I'm sorry. As much as we can blame Labour for currently not getting ahead of this issue, this is a legacy of the Conservatives and the coalition before. They cut 40% in real terms of the Ministry of Justice's budget because they reasoned nobody cares about paying lawyers, nobody cares about prisoners, nobody cares about prison officers. They were right to do that.
But equally, there were cuts that needed to be made.
There were cuts that needed to be made.
As a Labour minister admitted in 2010, there was no money left.
But the first duties of any government, defence and justice, upholding the laws and security.
Not justice, public order.
Public order, justice doesn't matter. It's all part of the same broad thing. And the fact that they decided actually this was the thing that they could cut above everything else, whilst keeping all sorts of other things, that's a sign of the lack.
You might have a short-term benefit in your budget, but it ends up being an absolute disaster. And, by the way, costs a lot more.
A huge amount of money. Because we are going to have to build prison spaces. We can't keep on going on.
But that's why I don't understand why Labour have changed the law. Right? It did it under Starmer, and this is this early release scheme. But it seems to go on in perpetuity. No, build enough prisons, but build them now. I want people literally with the spades, diggers, right now building those prisons. Same with all the other things we need building, like nuclear reactors. We're
told that public works is an investment in the economy. What's the problem? Create jobs for builders.
Prisons are absolutely an investment.
Absolutely.
In terms of keeping our country safe. Very interesting, actually, talking about other criminals. We were told this morning, according to the Victims Minister, Alex Davies-Jones, last night, speaking to BBC News now, she said the Prime Minister had agreed to meet Jeffrey Epstein's victims, the ones in the UK, and that Andy Burnham was looking into the possibility of holding a public inquiry into the UK activities of Jeffrey Epstein, but also Mohammed Al-Fayed, the former Harrods owner, and others. As I tweeted that this morning, I thought this is absolutely ridiculous. We don't need an inquiry. How on earth did these incredibly wealthy, powerful men get away with their crimes for so long? Because they were incredibly wealthy, powerful men. That's how it worked. There's big question marks about, police officers on the books and all of. I mean, come on. I mean, links with royals and things. I mean, come on. We know how that works. We don't need a public inquiry. A 5-year-old can work this stuff out. But a great way of, let's talk about this rather than the thousands of Asian let's call them Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs, where everyone's going, well, how have taxi drivers and kebab shop owners been able to get away with this for years? Because the authorities turned a blind eye. All of these crimes are wrong. And as Julia Roberts famously said, with Pretty Woman, that's just geography. Whether it happens on a private jet or a posh island in the Caribbean or above a kebab shop in Rochdale, that's just geography. The same crime is happening. But again, we don't need an inquiry into that. Well, it's just emerged. PA, Press Association, have reported they understand that Andy Burnham is not actively considering a public inquiry into Jeffrey Epstein or others. I mean, thank goodness for that, if that is the case, because what a waste of money. We need an inquiry into what happened and why there was a failure to actually go after the people who were committing crimes en masse in this country.
We know that it happened on an industrial scale, and the problem, of course, with all of this is, and you can understand why lots of Labour supporters or MPs might want it, because it fits into their narrative. Mohammed Al-Fayed, Jeffrey Epstein, powerful white men, or just men in general. And the point is, these other communities.
Well, according to my social media, apparently, I just want to deflect from the Jews doing these crimes. That was my reaction. No, we know why they We know why they got away with it. They were rich and powerful.
How have we not moved on?
Doesn't make it okay.
2,000 years in Europe of still going, it's always their fault. It's always their fault, these people.
Exactly.
Honestly.
But there we are. Listen, that brings us on. What do you make of this situation with Kemi Badenoch? Because it is a situation with Kemi Badenoch. We've got the Tories, and look, I doubt very much she approves every single local council candidate in Somerset, but a guy called Joshua Bonehill Payne has been selected. Now, he's 34 years old. Back in 2015, he was jailed for 3 years. That's quite a long sentence for posting vile anti-Semitic comments online, promoting a planned anti-Jewification march in Golders Green, North London, of course, big Jewish area where there have been some stabbings recently. He created a poster for the event using an image of Auschwitz, so the rally would be, quote, an absolute gas. A year later, he was sentenced for a further 2 years after he was found guilty of harassing Luciana Berger. She was a Labour MP at the time. She's now a Baroness. Luciana Berger, who's Jewish, very prominent, she faced anti-Semitism with her own party and failure of Jeremy Corbyn to do it. She quit the party as a result of that. He described her as a rodent, an evil money grabber, in a series of posts on his blog. She is talking about it today, about how, this man, I mean, it went far beyond that. Horrible, foul, misogynistic stuff directed at other women as well. He founded the National British Resistance, a far-right group. He's also got a conviction for assaulting a police officer and burglary of a police station. We're told he was de-radicalised during his time in prison. He's now an anti-extremism campaign. He works with the police and in schools to deliver training to combat anti-Semitism. Jewish groups, Jewish leaders have hit out and said this is an unacceptable person to be chosen as a candidate. His past views, he said his past views were indefensible. The Board of Deputies of British Jews called on the Conservatives to ditch him, saying the selection beggars belief. Kemi Badenoch has defended it, saying she says, we believe in second chances for good people. She said he's shown contrition, he knew what he did was wrong. She said, I think people can look at me and know that I'm not a person who'd be recruiting neo-Nazis. Josh is someone who actually has been certified by the Home Office to train police officers on anti-Semitism and on countering extremism. Not sure I trust the Home Office's judgment. Yes, she says he's somebody who's been previously convicted, but he's someone who has shown contrition for his crimes, has been rehabilitated and is spending every day working to solve the very problem which he knew he had caused previously. Now, it is a tricky one. I believe in redemption. I tell you what, the Guardian and the left who were jumping on this, yeah, if this was a Muslim, if there's anyone of colour or ethnic minority or religious minority who said, oh, I'm no longer I'm no longer a radical Islamist and I'm going to speak out against it, they would be leaping all over, say, oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Because it's Tory, I think they're different on that. However, I think the extent of his crimes makes him unsuitable. I think carry on being de-radicalised, carry on the campaigning, but do I think you are someone who should be selected by a major party to stand for office? He's still entitled to stand for public office, in my view. Yeah. I don't think this is the hill to die on, Kemi Badenoch. Yeah,
I mean, the worst thing that we haven't considered is maybe he genuinely was the best candidate. Maybe there's such a paucity of talent in the Conservative Party that they looked at this guy and went, well, it can't get any worse. I think that, you're right about redemption because, my word, actually, we don't get enough redemption in this country. Our system is actually quite bad at rehabilitating people. So this is a success story. Not just the
system. I mean, our media are, well, I mean, you get cancelled, you're done.
So if he is a success story, then that's fantastic. That said, he can do, and is presumably doing, a lot of good work by not being an elected representative. Does he need to be an elected official in order to carry on that good work? I would argue no. Now, obviously, Kemi Badenoch is going to be more party to why it is that they've done that than I am. I would simply say, is it actually the best use of this man's time? If he really is the redeemed character, which I hope he is, does he need to be a councillor to carry on that work? Or should he just be focusing on that? I would argue probably not. There's nothing wrong with the Conservative Party promoting him and saying, look at this man as a great example of how it is that we can fix things. Yeah. Does he need to be a representative? I'd argue probably not.
Yeah, well, again, a lot of people should view running as a councillor as to be a stepping stone. To go forward, and as Luciana Berger says, she's in the House of Lords. She's just, not even just as a Jewish woman, but as a woman, she doesn't. Some of the stuff he's posted doesn't want him around. Do people change that much? I mean, that's the question. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think Kemi Badenoch is right? She's defending the Tory selection as council candidate. He was jailed for neo-Nazi activism, saying now that he's reformed. Give us a call 0344 499 1000. You're of course welcome on any of the other stories as well. Plenty more besides we're going to get to. Coming up, we'll take your calls. 10:26 is the time. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:28 is the time. Let's go to your call straight away. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Any of the topics we've been talking about. Paul is in Hartlepool. Paul, you want to talk about the Tories selecting this former neo-Nazi candidate, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I mean, everybody deserves a second chance, but this guy sounds like he's been a bad and all his life.
Yeah.
And basically, for her to back him, everybody looks at people and says, yeah, he's worth a second chance, but this guy sounds like he's been at it a long time.
Well, that's it. I do think, second chance, someone who's done something in their youth, and yes, obviously, he was younger then, but you're thinking, I'm thinking shoplifting, I'm thinking got in a bit of a fight with somebody outside a nightclub or something. I'm thinking second chances for that, go in with the wrong crowd or something. But that seems to me to be something that's kind of come from the soul.
Yeah, it sounds to every with this guy. Another thing I was going to say, these two guys that are getting let out of prison.
Yeah, well, among the thousands, by the way, the PC Harper's killers. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not Nostradamus, right? But I can see the front pages of every paper in the country with champagne bottles popping outside the prison cells.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we saw that in September 24 when people released it. I mean, people turning up to be picked up in Lamborghinis and things. It's like, oh, crime does pay apparently after all. But the thing about those two guys, they showed no remorse when they were sentenced. They were giggling and smirking in the court.
That's it. I just can't see, and with it being a police officer especially, I just can't understand why they couldn't have found a bit more space by letting out a petty fee rather than them two. No. It's just unbelievable.
No, and also, again, I keep saying, we've got, 85, 90,000, whatever, people behind bars. Only 1,000 have been convicted of manslaughter. The murderers aren't allowed out under this particular scheme. So only 1,000. This is not going to be the difference, make or break, of whether we've got enough prison spaces.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, and what can I just finally? Can I ask you what you make of Andy Burnham on this? Because he said yesterday, and we talked about it on the show a lot yesterday. He said, "Look, I've done the best I can. We don't want to let people out. We've got no choice, basically." What do you say? What do you say to that?
He's a prime minister. He should be able to say, right, anybody that attacks or kills a person that's a nurse or anybody that's
someone doing their job
should get the full force of the law. There shouldn't be, they should took the key away basically. They should the people should say, oh, I don't do that. If I ate them, I don't go to jail.
And that's the difference with police officers in particular, isn't it? And people who have to run towards the danger, whereas we can go, oh, those guys are thieving that quad bike, because what apparently they were up to when the police turned up. But he runs towards them because that's his job. And exactly. Paul, thank you for that. I think a lot of common sense there that Prime Minister should be listening to, or possibly Kemi Badenoch do. Let's go to Greg, who is in Edinburgh. Greg, you want to talk about the August silly season story today, which is that men aren't going to be allowed into women's toilets.
Well, good morning, Julia. But unfortunately, it's not an August silly season topic. It's a 2-3 decades long silly topic. Whenever the Gender Recognition Act came in, I think it's about 20 years ago, maybe longer. The Parliament, can you imagine if 20 years ago Parliament said, we now have the power to allow the state to give you a certificate that says you can breathe in a vacuum?
Yeah.
And the whole issue, it's fundamental change in that law that needs addressed.
Yeah.
To say that, no, we were wrong in the Gender Recognition Act. You cannot change sex.
Yeah.
And no party is addressing that to say we got it wrong for whatever reason, whether it was humanity or just wanting to appear nice.
Yeah.
That we brought in legislation that was just ridiculous.
Yeah, but again, I think the whole thing was people thought, I mean, by the way, I looked up, it's 2004. It's a lot further back than perhaps most people would expect. I think it was about being nice to people who just, you know, and who were confused about their identity and things. But I think people didn't think that it would become as mad as it has become in terms of basically kind of pretty militant men demanding to basically have rights over women.
Well, I don't know if you can forgive them in 2004. They were legislators.
Yeah.
They were meant to have brain.
Yeah.
And not be swayed by the fact that something was reality or not reality.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What you think is fine. Carry on thinking it. But yeah, I'm afraid it's not relevant to the rest of us. Greg, I appreciate that call. Thank you very much. 10:34 is the time. Well, lots coming up. Delighted to say up next is going to be the brilliant, the wonderful Brendan O'Neill. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. 10:35 is the time. Let's go straight to my next guest, chief political writer at Spiked Online and author, of course, Brendan O'Neill. Oh, good morning to you, Brendan.
Hi, Julia. How's it going?
Very well indeed. Thanks for joining us. Let's start with the silly season story. We always get a silly season story in the summer, and that is that apparently we're going to have what trans groups are saying utterly unworkable guidance for many of our public spaces and indeed private places like cafes as well, leisure centres and others, basically requiring that men use toilets for men and women use toilets for women, and whether you're trans identified or not, you use the toilet that matches your biological sex, not what you happen to think you are or what you're wearing that day. This apparently is unworkable, trans groups say. What do you make of that?
I mean, silly season, it's more like psycho season. I mean, who ever thought it would come to this, that we would need guidelines to tell people what toilet to use, or basically, let's be honest about it, to tell blokes to stay the hell out of women's bathrooms. Yeah. That's what we need this for, because the real problem we faced in recent years is that men who claim to be women, but they aren't women, have been using women's facilities when they shouldn't be. It's so depressing that we need these kinds of guidelines. I can't tell you, Julia, how much contempt I have for men who go into women's bathrooms. And this is not me playing the brave, gallant feminist. This is basic social manners. Yeah. I remember when I was young, if a drunk bloke wandered into the women's bathroom in a pub, whether by accident or on purpose, he would have had a serious talking to and maybe even a clip round the ear.
There would have been an immediate, oi, mate,
yeah,
get the hell out.
Get the hell out. Everyone would have said it. And if he said, I identify as a woman, he would have been laughed out of the pub. So there's been a breakdown in basic manners, in basic decorum, and in respect for women's spaces. And that is what the trans movement has given us, this kind of tear in society.
But also a breakdown in women's ability and willingness to stand up for themselves. And to say, no, I mean, again, women have always said, not me, I'm not afflicted by this, but most women are afflicted by a terrible need to be thought of as a nice person and to be liked. Not bothered me ever personally, you may have guessed, but no, and so they, they well, I don't want to say anything. Get the hell out of my toilet, or I'll force you out. It would be my reaction, and it would have been my reaction at 13 as well as 58. But lots of women aren't like that, and they shouldn't have to be like that. And it's interesting that the former boss of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, she said, she's concerned that women are going to have to police this because you've got so many organisations that won't. And by the way, as they keep pointing out, this is 16 months after that Supreme Court ruling telling us what everyone already knew, which is that men are men and women are women based on biological sex. But we've still got all these organisations saying, well, the law has changed. The law hasn't changed. It was always this. They've been in the wrong all this time. But the guidance is now very clear. There's nothing to discuss. But we've got councils like Lambeth Council in South London, very near to where we are here, run by the Greens now. Good luck to all the people of Lambeth for that. And they've had a council vote a month ago, or a few weeks ago now, saying, we urge the council to not enforce this if it's legally possible to not enforce this. But it's not, is it? It will be illegal to not enforce this guidance.
Yeah, and an example should be made of every single institution or cafe or gallery or local council that refuses to enforce these rules.
NHS hospital.
All of them, absolutely. They really should be dragged over the coals, legally speaking, and an example should be made of them, because it's really tragic that it's come to this, but we need to make it clear to society as much as possible that if you are male, if you have a penis, or you ever had a penis, you should stay out
no matter how small.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, we don't care about the details of it. Just get the hell out of women's spaces. And the thing is that, people say that most trans identifying men aren't dangerous. That's not even the point. I mean, it shouldn't be for women to figure out.
Most men who don't identify as trans aren't dangerous. But the funny thing is, as we've always said, as women say, when you're walking down a street on your own at night on the way back, from the bus or something, and it's dark, and you realise there's a man behind you, really unhelpfully, they don't carry a sign saying, I'm not one of the bad ones.
Yeah, exactly. And it shouldn't be left to women to decide which ones are the good ones and which ones are the bad ones. All men should stay out of these spaces. But it's just that extreme narcissism of identity politics, where these people think the world exists to validate their identity. The reason they want to go into women's bathrooms, the reason they are insistent that they shouldn't have to use gender-neutral toilets, but actually
which is an obvious solution.
Exactly. It's because they think the world exists to flatter their delusions. And that's what we've got to really shake out of people's heads. The world doesn't exist to shine a mirror on your stupid identity.
But we also have to accept, and again, this is something we need to be more and more open about, that an awful lot of them, there are people who genuinely believe they're born in the wrong body, and I'm sorry, I have nothing but sympathy and empathy, and I want them to get the help they can, and I want people to treat them with respect and kindness. However, there are an awful lot of men as well who just get their kicks going into women's toilets or wearing women's underwear, and we need to accept that that is what it is, and those people are definitely a danger to women. I mean, there's also the crucial thing about changing rooms. Again, we have all these cases with these nurses, mostly women, but the nurses' women's changing room, and a doctor, again and again, it's always a senior man, isn't it, saying, well, I'm wearing my bra and I call myself Sheila, so I'm going to stand and watch you while you get down to your bra knickers. And bearing in mind, these women don't have any choice. They are not allowed to wear their uniform when they go to work, and when they have to change into the uniform and change out of it in work, and it's a uniform that basically gets you down to your underwear. And we've seen case after case after case. And even with the Supreme Court ruling, those cases, Sandy, Peggy and others, carried on because the hospital bosses are still insistent the rights of a man who wants to pervily look at women getting undressed at work trump the rights of women to their dignity and their safety.
It's extraordinary. And those nurses you mentioned, Sandy, Peggy and the Darlington nurses, these are
absolute heroes.
Real heroes. These are largely working class women, working hard for a living, looking after people. Where are the trade unions? The trade unions stab them in the back. Where is the left that supposedly cares about workers' rights? They couldn't give a damn about a female worker's right to her own space at work. Where's the Green Party, the supposedly radical left Green Party that now runs places like Lambeth? They don't care about these nurses. They think they should be forced by their ideology to undress with men. So the abandonment of these women by so-called progressives is one of the problems we face. And I think we're going to face that problem as we try to enforce these rules. But I, for one, thinking of myself as a good citizen, I'm going to be on the lookout for this kind of behavior too. And I think we all have to say enough is enough. You don't belong in these spaces.
Absolutely. Does a man who's convicted of basically neo-Nazi activism and harassing a woman MP, Luciana Berger, now a Labour peer, should that man be selected as a Tory councillor in Somerset? This is Joshua Bonehill Payne, and Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, has defended his selection as a candidate in Somerset on the basis that she believes in second chances. Jewish organisations criticise the selection of this man. They have. The Jewish Leadership Council and the Board of Deputies of British Jews have formally rejected an offer to meet this man, as suggested by Kemi Badenoch. He's 34 now. He now campaigns against extremism and anti-Semitism in schools on behalf of the Home Office. That's great. But he was jailed for 3 years in 2015, posting anti-Semitic comments online, promoting a planned anti-Jewification march in Golders Green. A poster of the event used an image of Auschwitz, saying the rally would be an absolute gas. He was also sentenced to 2 years behind bars because he was guilty of harassing Luciana Berger. She quit the party over anti-Semitism, as we know. He also has a historic conviction for assaulting a police officer and burglary of a police station, and set up a far-right group called the National British Resistance. Does this man have a right to redeem himself and run as a Tory candidate, or do you think this is not a hill that Kemi Badenoch should be dying on?
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because on the one hand, I am listening to all of those Jewish organisations and Luciana Berger herself, who has spoken about the experience she had with this man back in...
And it was horrific.
Really horrific, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole Labour Party was just a cesspit at that time. And then she was being harassed by this bloke as well. So awful behaviour. And I think Jewish organisations don't have to meet this man if they don't want to. Yeah. They can tell him to get stuffed. So that's all fine. On the other hand, I thought Kemi Badenoch's comments about believing in rehabilitation were really interesting. And it made me think, you know, do we as a society believe in rehabilitation? And I remember when I was a kid, every now and then someone would come into the school to do a talk, and it would be a bloke who'd been in jail for burglary 15 years earlier. And he would do a talk about, you know, behave yourselves, respect your parents, do well.
You don't want to go to prison, yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to screw up your life like I did. And that kind of stuff can be helpful. Now, I don't know the details of this gentleman and how rehabilitated he really is. But Kemi Badenoch says he is, and I kind of take her word for it. But whether it's a hill she wants to die on, as you say, that's a slightly different question, I think.
Yeah, indeed. Here's another hill Labour want to die on, or do they anymore? Big campaign for votes at 16 across England already, of course, votes at 16 in Scotland. Something I've always objected to on the basis of the very simple thing that you get a vote, I believe, as a British citizen who's an adult. I don't think if people, non-British citizens, should get to vote. I think we're all pretty surprised to discover that, you know, citizens of some Commonwealth countries can vote in our country. No. But also, you need to be an adult, and 16 and 17-year-olds aren't adults. I don't care how much they know about politics. They're not adults, they don't get to vote. But Labour said they wanted to bring it in. It was in the Labour manifesto under Keir Starmer in 2024. But warning has been given to Andy Burnham, following a report by the Muslim Council of Britain, which said that by 2029, which is the last year we can have a general election, there'll be 49 constituencies where the Muslim voting population aged 16 or over will exceed the incumbent MP's 2024 margin of victory by 10,000 votes or more. So we could just see a whole load of sort of pro-Gaza, independent MPs, rather than, let's face it, what Labour were really hoping for was a load of more Labour MPs, because the idea is that young people are more likely to vote on the left. Do you think they're going to find a way of very quietly backtracking on this?
I hope so. I mean, what a mess the whole thing is. I really agree with you that to vote in this country, you should be over the age of 18 and you should be a British citizen. I mean, those are basic requirements, and I can't believe we even have to have this conversation. But, you know, votes for 16, the Labour idea, it was always generational gerrymandering. That's what it was. They were hoping to create this whole new layer of voters who they thought would vote Labour, because 16-year-olds tend to be a bit lefty, sometimes a bit dumb, you know, kind of slightly naive. So they they thought
indoctrinated by their lefty teachers.
Exactly. Perfect, fodder for the Labour Party. But of course, what would happen is that lots of 16-year-olds would vote for the cranky Greens, as you say, and as these figures show, a lot of 16-year-old Muslims would vote for those nutters, who Gaza Independents and others, and that's a real problem. It was never a serious democratic idea. It was never about expanding democracy. There's no marches by 16-year-olds for the right to vote like there was by working-class men and then by women. There's no demand for this. It was just something created by the political establishment to try and keep certain people in power. I really hope they backtrack.
Absolutely. Just finally, I know you were as devastated as I was by the death of Rod Liddle, a man you've done numerous interviews with, done some work with at Spike, and you've written about him since his death. I haven't been surprised, but I'm always sort of disappointed in many on the left's reaction to his death. This idea, similar to what we had with Anne Widdecombe, horrific murder. But there's some element where he was a horrible, nasty. Apparently, I think he's a racist, paedophile, wife beater. I don't think there's any evidence he's actually any of those things. The caution. I explained that on the show the other day. The circumstances of that, and somehow that he deserved to die at what is far too early an age, at 66. What do you make of some of the left's reaction to the death of Rod Liddle?
It's just disgusting, isn't it? But the funny thing is, if we can say funny, is that Rod Liddle would have really enjoyed it.
Yes,
he would have laughed his head off at these humorless idiots, these kind of witless morons on the internet who take everything literally, who don't understand jokes, don't understand satire, don't understand humor, have never told a joke in their lives in case it causes offense. Just the most humorless people in the country. He would have laughed. He would have written a column about it if he was still around. That's the great irony. But there's a cruelty to it as well, isn't there? And it really does feed, I think, from cancel culture, to this idea that people have that they should have the right to live without ever hearing a disagreeable idea or a funny joke or an offensive joke. They really do want to be ring-fenced from all of that, which is why they celebrate when people die. I think there's something really repulsive about that.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Brendan O'Neill, thank you very much. Great to talk to you about all those different topics. Thank you. Benedict Spence, do you want to react to that,
on the issue of Rod Liddle? I've always thought it was a great barometer for human intelligence, whether or not you could read Rod Liddle's columns and get them or not.
And think they were literal.
Yes, so many people fail the test so spectacularly badly. And I've had the same thing, because I posted about Rod Liddle and how sad it was, and you get people saying, oh, he was a paedophile apologist and he was this, that and the other, and you just kind of sat there going, it must be really interesting living in your head. Yeah. Like, the world must be completely different to how it is for so many of the rest of us.
They're the sort of people who, when someone says, God, I could kill him, they actually go, oh my God, do I need to go to the police and report? Because they literally go to kill. They must, that very literal, po-face, a humorous world must be very, very boring.
One of the things about Rod Liddle's columns also, they age really well. Go back and read them. They're still really funny.
And by the way, and all the ones that the lefties are posting as the really, really offensive ones,
they're great.
Laugh out loud, so every single one. 10:50 is... I don't believe in God, but God bless you, Rod. Up next, we're going to be talking more about the early release scheme. Now, the latest scandal is the emergence that more than 9,000 domestic abusers are going to be released as part of this scheme. Let's be talking to the former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville about that. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. This is Talk, the Home and Common Sense. Me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk more about this early release scheme for prisoners. Scandal over the fact that we're going to get rapists and child abusers being released even earlier from their prison cells than they should be. Always too early, by the way, even under the existing schemes. Then we were told, no, it won't be them, but there will be people who are killers, including the killers of PC Harper. But now we're told there is a way of getting around that. But, if Andy Burnham were willing to do it when he's not on his hollybobs. But also, now we discovered that over a 3-year period, we're going to have over 9,000 domestic abusers who are due to be released back onto the streets and, let's face it, often into the homes with the people with whom they actually abused to get convicted. Let's talk about this with Mike Neville, former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector. Morning to you, Mike.
Good morning, Julia.
I mean, genuinely, I find this almost one of the most worrying things. It's great that, the rapists and grooming gang assailants are not going to be released because we know, a pattern of behaviour from some of these people. But domestic abusers, there is always a pattern of behaviour. You don't go to prison because you've said one wrong thing to your ex-girlfriend. We are talking about most women who are largely the victims of domestic abuse spend years trying to get their abusers behind bars. And we also know they often have quite a high reoffending rate.
Yeah, absolutely, Julia. You don't go to prison for the first occasion, do you?
No.
And these men will often reoffend. And the fact that the reoffending rate is so low just tells me that a lot of these cases aren't ever reported.
Well, we're looking at around the 25-30% of these men who release will be convicted. But that's convicted. It had to actually be reported and had to go to court and get a conviction. It's quite, that's ignoring all the other stuff that doesn't actually end up in court.
It is absolutely right. And the idea of prisons is to, keep us safe from violent men in particular, because, of course, 96% of prisoners are men. Yeah. But what strikes me with this whole thing, Julia, is I don't think the left have ever really liked the idea of punishment and prisons. And this is giving them the excuse to let people out. And so all their energy is on making up rules as to who can be released and all this sort of thing. Let's have some energy into creating a solution. And I can write it for them now. So straight away, in every prison, there are loads of open spaces like exercise yards. Fill them full of porta cabins or tents. Let out women prisoners who are mainly non-violent and use Holloway and prisons like that to put it in men. Take over some army camps and some of the women can go in there if need be. Ship out most of the foreign offenders. If they're there for really violent, wicked offences where people need to see them punished, then keep them. But the rest of the fraudsters and thieves, will ship them out so they can steal and defraud people in the nation they're from. Now, this is back of a fag packet stuff I can do here.
Yeah, you don't have to be, I get you are an expert as an ex-senior copper, but yet you don't have to be. We've been talking about this for the last few weeks. None of this is beyond the wit of man, but Andy Burnham, when he wrote his piece to the Telegraph yesterday, it was like, well, I imagine he wrote it in between, packing the suitcases for his family holiday 2 weeks into doing the job. Not that there's anything to need to be getting on with, Andy. But he's saying, look, I've looked into this. I don't want to release these people. But it was kind of what can I do? Well, all of the things you've just suggested.
Yeah, absolutely. And also it's the lies that the public are told, So what we're told is like the tags, or they'll be put on a tag. And what people imagine is that if you're put on a tag, you're sort of in prison in your house, you can't go out. My own research shows that only 23% of the breaches, so when somebody goes out at the wrong time or goes within 100 yards of a school or whatever the criteria is, only 23% of those result in an arrest. Now, those arrests might result in somebody saying, oh, don't do it again, and be sent home. So it's totally ineffectual, because what the government do, they introduce things like tags, but then they don't introduce a tag checking team. So they offload it on the police. Now, the police are already swamped. And do you know what? They're going to be swamped even more, because all those prolific burglars, thieves, robbers, rapists, domestic abusers are being released. So they're going to create more crime. So this is an absolute wave that's going to hit society and make us less safe in our homes, on the streets. And we're being badly let down because politicians are not getting a grip. And as you say, Burnham going on holiday, when you take command, when you're in charge of something, that's a matter of sacrifice. And I always fall back on the British Legion motto, service before self. If you take that job, you tell your family, I'm sorry, I'm the Prime Minister, you've got to go on your own. Because there's crisis here, and my job is for the nation. The nation comes first.
No one else goes on holiday 2 weeks after starting a major new job. It's extraordinary. Can we talk about PC Hopper very, very briefly? Just, because a lot of people say, killer's going to be let out, manslaughter, people who've got convicted of manslaughter. There's only 1,000 behind bars, so it'll only be, max a few hundred. That's not going to be the difference between prisons overcrowding or not. Should there be an exemption for those who have killed police officers and others carrying out their public service who've come into contact with the people who've killed them because they're doing their job on behalf of us?
Yeah, of course. There's this heinous crime. I've actually stood in front of the Thames Valley Memorial and bowed my head because his name is on there. I did a course for Thames Valley Police not long after it occurred, and the feelings were very raw then, as they are still now. And credit to the Chief Constable of Thames Valley and the head of the Federation in Thames Valley Police for really pushing this and asking for a judicial review. And credit also to his wife and mother, who have been tireless campaigners and actually changed the law. So we've got this ridiculous situation where those two brave women changed the law about our emergency service killers imprisoned, and then it doesn't apply to the person who was...
But you can't backdate the law. But then the law about him being released, these two men being released early, is a new law which could easily not include those in those circumstances. Mike Neville, I feel your frustration. I think everyone shares it. Former Met Police Detective and Chief Inspector Mike Neville, thank you very much indeed for that. We'll talk more about that with Benedict Spence coming up, all of the other big topics. Love to hear your thoughts on any and all of the stories we're talking about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Coming up a little bit later, we are also going to be talking about, is there a chance of some sort of deal over the Strait of Hormuz? Is that coming up? We'll also be talking to the Chief Executive of Sex Matters, Maya Forstetter, about this silly season story about men not being allowed to use women's loos. Whatever will they come up with next? This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's 11:02. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio or watching on YouTube, great to have your company. To go to my YouTube page if you missed anything from the show so far. Julia Hartley-Brewer Show is what it's called. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss anything. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be discussing the silly season story for August. You have to have one. I mean, yesterday it was, of course, we've got a new Prime Minister who's been desperate to be in the job and so much to do, and he's going to change everything. And he decided the first thing he's going to change is flights at an airport by going on holiday. Just extraordinary 2 weeks into the job. But today's silly season story is that apparently it's going to be the law, and weirdly, always has been the law, but new guidance making it very clear that men can't go into women's toilets even if they put a wig on and a fake pair of boobs and a skirt, because they're still men, or even if they cut their bits off. Still men. That comes into force today. We'll talk about that with Maya Forstatter coming up very soon. We're also going to be talking about international affairs. Donald Trump says the Strait of Hormuz will be open very soon. He keeps saying that, though, doesn't he? He warned that if it did not happen, Iran would be hit hard. We're told there are some talks ongoing. Whether or not the Strait of Hormuz was open, whether there would still be tolls of some sort paid to either Iran or Oman on the other side, we don't know. But we'll talk about that a little bit later, because, of course, if you're worried about your cost of living, getting 86p, is it 86p, I think, off your electricity bill when it goes up by way more than that under Ofgem in the autumn, that's not going to matter as much as Strait of Hormuz being open in terms of long-term impact on the cost of our living. So we'll talk about all of that. Love to hear your thoughts on anything and everything we're talking about, including Kemi Badenoch defending the Tories selecting a council candidate who was jailed for neo-Nazi activism. She says he has been reformed. Well, Luciana Berger, who was the victim of some of his horrific anti-Semitic and misogynistic abuse, and he went to court over this and served prison time for it, says she doesn't believe actually he should be a councillor. Is this a hill to die on for Kemi Badenoch? Is this about redemption? Do you believe in that? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text us on 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls to charge the national rate, and text cost £1, standard network rate message. But those details available for any and all of the stories we are talking about. Just to let you know, very soon the Green Party leader, Zach Polansky, still here apparently, he's going to be holding a press conference shortly in which he apparently is going to deliver an urgent message to the Prime Minister. That'll be interesting to know what he's got to say. We'll let you know what he says as soon as we hear it. Delighted to say Conservative commentator Benedict Spence is live with us in the studio. Morning to you.
Oh, I have to say, I can't wait for that press conference. I can't wait to hear what he has to say.
I'm fine, as long as he doesn't dance.
Emergency dental care for all. That'll, whatever it is, I reckon it's going to be good.
Including Zach Polansky, with
especially
all due respect.
Zach Polansky, right at the
start. There's no excuse in this day and age, is there?
I mean, we're British. Famously, we're all supposed to have bad teeth. But come on, that's overkill.
We do actually have dentists.
Allegedly.
You don't have to use pliers on your own teeth. Anyway, should we talk about something more important? Again, I said
this. Is it bathrooms? Is it?
Silly.
There we
again,
go.
What's the problem? Andy Burnham, Prime Minister, when he's not on holiday, he said in recent months before becoming Prime Minister that he doesn't really. He's just like, everyone needs to be a bit more relaxed. What's the problem? About who uses which bathroom. Yeah, easy to say when you're a man. I mean, yes, women do use men's bathrooms sometimes. I have been guilty of this in the past, when it's literally a queue about a mile long for the women's 2 cubicles, and the men have got 2 cubicles and urinals, and it's like, oh, come on, can we please? Now, I do think, I understand the imposition on the men. I do get that. But I don't think the men are going, oh, my God, this person might be about to sexually assault me or rape me. I don't think that's what men feel. They go, oi, I'm in my loo. We know about the reasons why we have single-sex spaces, whether it's changing rooms, whether it's toilets. I would have thought rape counselling centres and refuges for women would be rather even more obvious ones, hospital wards and the like. And yet, for the last quite a few years, trans activists have basically said, no, trans women are women, I lie, factually untrue, and that they have the right to be in all of those spaces. And it doesn't mean, and by the way, when they say trans women, they do not mean men who've cut everything off, had a load of drug treatment and could pass as women. They mean a bloke who says, my name's Sheila right now, and they've put on a dress or not, Usually they just like putting on the underwear. Let's be honest, and claim to be a woman, who are clearly a threat to women and girls. Basically, we've got new guidance, comes into force today. Single-sex spaces open to the public, such as toilets and changing rooms, whether they're in a sports centre or a cafe, should be based on biological sex. This was a ruling from the Supreme Court in April last year. 16 months on, we've finally got this guidance in force. It was published in June, now in place in England, Wales and Scotland. Different things apply in Ireland. And trans rights campaigners have called the guidance unworkable. Huh?
Yeah.
On what plane?
Unworkable just meaning we're not going to do it.
We're
That's
not
all
going
that
to
it
obey
means.
the law.
That's all that it means, because of course it's entirely workable. It's very straightforward. It's very obvious. Here is one bathroom, here is another. This one has M, and if you turn the M upside down, you have W. Wonderful. Everybody knows where they go based on their biological sex, what they were born as. You can choose. It's really easy to do that. Or maybe, if you're having a real identity crisis, there might be a disabled one. It tends to be the law that there is. And if it's about your dignity or something about that, you can go to the disabled one. They're there for people who are disabled to be able to go to the bathroom with dignity. But you don't have to go to the other one. You have two choices already.
I mean,
you
again,
don't
there'll be
need the
places where
third.
that's not available. But, well, you know, here's a phrase we don't hear often in public life. Tough titties.
Yes, go in the bush.
That's what I say to you, tough titties.
Pee in the bush.
It's the idea that 51%, that's what we are, 51% of the population should accommodate the needs of, what, the desires of 0.0001% of the population because they feel uncomfortable. And what I love is, my favourite argument I get from people who are trans activists about why well, they call themselves trans women, they're not, they're trans-identified men, call them what they are, why trans-identified men could not possibly use a men's toilet because they would face the physical threats of attack by men in toilets. It's almost like that's the reason why women don't want men in their toilets.
Yeah, I find the terminology. You trip over the terminology all the time. I would like to be able to use todgily challenged as the word. I would like that, and I don't.
No,
I think everybody understands what that is.
Most men who claim that they are again, I would just say you either believe or pretend to be a woman. Some people genuinely believe, and I think those people deserve kindness and respect. The men who pretend to be, I don't think they do. I think they should be. I think we should look at their hard drives.
I was going to say, you say if you put your money where your mouth is, you go through all the surgeries and you do all of that sort of thing, and you completely re-augment your life, you at the very least deserve dignity.
Yes.
But if you are indeed Phil and you are balding and you have a beard and you just decide I quite like Victoria's Secret or something more down market,
well, that's fine. Fill your boots, but don't do it in public life.
But I don't want them in my bathroom either.
No,
frankly.
exactly.
I've got to be honest with you. I don't want to have to indulge, that.
No. Don't bring your fetish to work.
The removal of public shame, the indulging of fetishes and things in public, I really do just disagree with. And I think actually we could solve a lot of problems by saying, by the way, that overt sexuality and pushing of sexuality into the public sphere actually is not normal.
I have a very big issue. Okay. Again, massively support gay rights and. Again, I don't know why we need to have marches for gay rights anymore, because gay people have exactly the same rights as straight people in this country now, and quite rightly too. And I think, yes, there is instance of there is still homophobia. Yes, there will always be people, racist or homophobic or sexist, but they're not the majority, and by a long way not the majority. And yet I don't understand these marches, but also the fact that a lot of these things, like Brighton just had a Pride march, and we get a whole month. No, we don't need that. And then why are the marches in July? You already had a month. I mean, do we get... When's my month? I'd like to know. Oh, you get 11 months a year. No, really? But... I'm sorry, I digress. But the whole, gimp mask, sexual fetish, everyone in leather... Fine, that's Philippines. But that's not about gay rights. That's not about equality. That's about you getting... That's about your preferred kind of sex. Can we not make that a civil liberties issue, please?
The only circumstances under which it's acceptable to wear a gimp mask in public is if you support Ipswich Town, in which case you do, you need something less shameful to go about.
Send your complaints.
But I was in Hastings the other week, of the weekend, and there were posters up everywhere saying, come to this talk on 100 years of queer history in Hastings, and I thought, my word, that sounds dull. Who on earth is going to turn up to this? What happened in this 100 years?
I don't like the word queer. Queer used to be an abusive word for gay people, and I won't use that but also queer also includes straight people. It's basically unattractive people with dyed hair and a lot of nose rings.
Yes.
Pretending they're interesting when they're largely not.
Yes, and it's the reclaiming of this abusive word and saying, but this is what I am, not gay, I'm something else, I'm something Italian. And this used to be a taboo.
You're just weird looking and not very interesting.
Yeah.
I think we need to just be a bit more honest with people. I'm just sorry.
Yeah.
I'm old-fashioned that way. Anyway,
no
we
excuse
digress.
for supporting Ipswich, though.
We're going to talk to Maya Fortune. We'll have a rather more sensible conversation with her. But I do think this should be treated with this level of humour, because it is absurd that you can have trans rights campaigners being reported in the BBC. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4. Their 5th paragraph: trans rights campaigners called the guidance unworkable. And we've often got like Lambeth Council, now run by the Greens. Sorry about that, folks, but you voted for them. Tough. Live with the consequences. They're basically urging the council not to enact this. If it's legal, of course, they have to be careful with their legalese. If it's legally possible, and of course, it's not legally possible. And any council official paid for by you and me who doesn't enact the law should be sacked on the spot. Oh, by the way, this is going to blow your minds, right? This is going to blow your minds. Zach Polanski is delivering an urgent message to Prime Minister Andy Burnham. He's giving a speech in London. You'll never guess what he's talking about.
Oh dear, what is it?
It's not about Jews.
Oh,
yeah?
that's
not
a relief.
I know.
Whoa.
It's not about Gaza.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's not about trans people.
He has other issues.
It's about sounding the alarm, in his words, over extreme weather.
The climate.
He's actually talking about
the environment.
I know. Well done, Andy.
I was going to say, has he like found a filing cabinet in the Greens head office?
I think Andy.
He's like found a filing cabinet, opened it up, and gone, the environment. Oh my word, guys! Why did no one tell me about this? This is gold dust. We've had all summer and we've not doubled down.
You know,
on
the
this.
best thing we could do about the extreme weather we've had is basically making sure we have really, really cheap, affordable, abundant, secure energy, and that we all get aircon units.
I thought you were going to say that we plant more vineyards, because actually that was what I was looking at as the great benefit of
this.
All this
Also works for me.
English wine is actually really good. It's a multi-award winning now. Admittedly, none of our vineyards are on fire like the French's are, but you know, you take the advantages where you can get them. This year at all the wine awards, we will be cleaning up.
Zach Polanski has just said, we are facing the biggest threat to this country since the Second World War. Extreme weather is now the new normal, and without action, the impact on people in this country will be incredibly grave. And I said all of that with a straight face, so well done me.
I'm sorry, that was my fault.
I lasted almost.
That's very much my fault.
Sorry.
I reckon you could have held it to the break if it wasn't for me.
We're coming out of an ice age. Coming out of an ice age, it's going to get warm. I think it's going to get warmer, colder, warmer, colder. I mean, so we largely do better in warmer weather. I'm intensely happy about us having warm weather. We're just going to have to redesign maybe our houses. I have a funny feeling. I've always had this. Each year I go, I'm going to buy an aircon unit. No, I'm not. Oh, no. The moment I buy an aircon unit, and I'm going to have to give in to this, I have a funny feeling we're going to have miserable grey summers for the next 4 years.
Do it now.
No, yeah, exactly.
Do it now. Really rain on their parade, quite literally.
No, exactly. Look, let's go back to this early release scheme. 9,300 domestic abusers are set to be released under this scheme, along with the killers, including killers of PC Andrew Harper. 3,000 perpetrators freed annually before serving their full sentences over the next 2 years. I mean, this is the bizarre situation where rapists won't be let out and child groomers won't be let out, child abusers, but you'll let out people who have killed people, including police officers, but you also let out people who've beaten the hell out of their wives and harassed and stalked. The fact that they have a 25 to 30% reoffending rate, and that is, by the way, and when people talk about reoffending rates, look, petty thieves have a much higher reoffending rate because they literally get out and then they shoplift again, or they burgle again. But we are talking about getting conviction for domestic abuse. It takes a long time, and it's quite rare actually.
The evidence is harder to accrue by its nature.
You tell me one case where a woman, often and her kids, has been killed in a horrible, violent attack, and it's not the ex, the husband, the boyfriend. And that man has not had a long history of harassing. The woman's often had a panic alarm, you name it. This is going to open up the risk, a serious risk for women. Again, these men won't have to have time to be rehabilitated. They're serving a fraction of their sentence. This is very, very bad news. I wonder if we're going to see yet another change in policy from Andy Burnham as each category of criminal is exposed. Yeah,
this is going to be, as you say, especially for on the back of a government that was faced many questions over its attitude towards the safety of women and girls to do with things like migration, etc. This is going to be another one of those things that people use as a stick, rightly, I think, to beat it with. But the problem is, of course, it comes amidst the greater issue, which is the lack of capacity in prisons. What Andy Burnham, I think, needs to do to head this off, because I do understand that this is something that he has inherited, although he should have had a plan ready to go, given how long he's wanted to be Prime Minister.
A plan?
He needs...
What? To be Prime Minister?
He needs a plan now, given the exponential rate at which the prison population is set to grow. He needs to announce, pretty sharpish, a number of more prisons being built, a timeline for that being built, if necessary legislation in order to speed that up. Because this is the other thing, actually. A lot of this modelling about how the prison population is likely to rise is probably based on the fact that so many people, as you've just said, are going to be released early having not been rehabilitated. Yeah. They will say, well, maybe therefore it's not necessary. No, you need the spare capacity. And far too often in all walks of life, our state operates on the basis that just below capacity
at all times. Hospitals, prisons, everything.
You need to get out ahead. You need the capacity.
But also, don't build like 5,000, but we need to build 30,000 spaces.
And if they're sat there empty for a couple of years, that's a good thing because you will
they shouldn't be, because you should be putting the people behind bars. Well, and the early release scheme. That's the thing about changing the law to have this just normalised. They want to have it normalised so they don't have to announce it each time. Yeah. And so it's just happening. The idea that people who committed the most horrific violent crime should be out halfway through their sentence and everyone else a third through their sentence is just obscene. Yeah. It is just obscene. And sentencing is a lie, as it is already. They should be serving at least 90% of their sentences. I don't know why not all. You should get extra penalties for bad behaviour, not time off for good behaviour. The whole thing is a sick decision. But when Andy Burnham's just like, you know, what can you do? Well, as we were talking to our, Mike Neville, former copper, there are loads of things they could do. Use women's prisons, army camps, get rid of foreign offenders. I mean, there's so many things they could do to make up tens of thousands of spaces.
But the fact of the matter is, even before this announcement came in, it was the norm that almost all prisoners, except the really serious ones, were let out significantly early. Yeah. That tells you, actually, that the prison capacity is half of what it needs to be. Therefore, if you were to turn around and say 30, 40, 50,000 places, that's still not actually what it should be.
And the reason why we have more people behind bars is because we have more people committing crimes. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons we have more people committing crimes is because people don't go to prison unless they committed a serious crime. Yeah. I mean, something like, about 30% of people behind bars have committed a violent offence, a seriously violent offence, or rape or murder or thing. That's a very high demographic. But that's because if you get sentenced to anything less than a year now, you don't even go to prison. Yeah. Those people, do you think that the guy who stole my bag 2 and a bit years ago, it's certainly that arrest warrant, August last year, still haven't found him. Don't think he's left the country, apparently. Still haven't found him. He's been out and about, and they're like, he just stole your bag. Well, actually, it cost me a fortune, insurance and blah, blah, blah. But also, crucially, I'm sorry, but these people are out stealing every day. I don't think he stole my bag as a one-off.
No, it incentivises them to keep doing it because they know that there are no repercussions. Yeah. And this is the thing. It's both, when he came in, Keir Starmer said we need a different approach to justice and we put far too many people in prison and the system's not working. If what you want is actually a system that focuses more on rehabilitation than punishment, guess what? Yeah. You still need the prison spaces. You still need them in prison long enough to be rehabilitated.
And also, by the way, that costs a hell of a lot more. Now, I think that's money well worth spending.
I think so too.
I would also like to spend that money long before. Was it Tony Blair said they tackled crime and the causes of crime? A huge number of people who go into prison are illiterate or semi-literate. Yeah. I mean, they're basically got their reading age is basically that of a primary school aged kid, if that. They're on drugs, coming from the care system, failed again and again. I think we should spend the money much earlier in looking at families and things like that. There are lots more very practical things that we could do that could make a difference. But once you commit crimes, there needs to be a very clear signal. And again, I don't know why anyone's got a Game Boy or Xbox, whatever the hell people are getting allowed to play in prison. Or basically, the prison officers, it keeps them quiet while they're locked in their cells 23 hours a day. Well, why don't we just give people books? That's the only option. And we'll give people literacy lessons. Countries like Sweden, they spend a fortune on their prison system. They have the lowest reoffending rate in the world. And by the way, prison systems are like, frankly, nicer than a lot of the hotel rooms we stay in.
Yeah, the Nordic model is very specific, though, and it works in a way. Norway and Sweden, both, and Denmark as well. They have better systems than ours, but you know what? They are actually getting worse. What's actually making them worse? Well, as migration numbers go up and you get more and more people who are culturally not that way inclined, it actually becomes a lot harder to rehabilitate those people because you're not teaching them to be a good Swedish or Norwegian citizen because they've got no interest and also no reference point for that. Yeah. So that is also...
Very fair point.
That's an important aspect of all of this.
Yeah. Right, look, let's also talk about, related to the crime issue, Kemi Badenoch defending the selection of a former neo-Nazi as a Tory candidate. The Tories have offered Jewish groups a meeting with him to see how well he has been, reformed. and they've refused, and I think they're perfectly entitled to do so. But Kemi Badenoch said, look, you can just look at me and know I'm not a person who would be recruiting neo-Nazis. But this guy's Joshua Bonehill-Payne. He's 34 years old. He basically was jailed for 3 years in 2015 for horrific anti-Semitic stuff online, promoting a planned anti-Jewification march in Golders Green, largely Jewish area. Created a poster for the event using an image of Auschwitz, so the rally would be an absolute gas. I mean, oh yeah, let's just joke. Now, I'm of the view you can joke about anything. That wasn't about a joke. That was about mocking. And there are people who live in Golders Green whose families, survived Auschwitz, for goodness sake. He's sentenced to a further 2 years. He was guilty of harassing Luciana Berger, then a Labour MP, now Baroness Berger. She's Jewish, obviously. He called her a rodent, an evil money grabber. But I mean, a series of posts. She said it was absolutely horrific. She's done an interview today just saying how absolutely devastating his sustained campaign was. She said, I still live today with the profound and deep impacts of those events. She had to go to court when she was pregnant, by the way. She said he had published reams of deeply racist, misogynistic and pornographic material about her. He also founded the National British Resistance, a far-right group. He also, small point, has an historic conviction for assaulting a police officer and burglary of a police station. Now, he now works as an anti-extremism campaigner. He's been reformed. He's been defended by Kemi Badenoch. She says, I believe in people in reform and redemption. Second chances. How? Second chances because you got in with the wrong crowd, you were involved in a pub fight, you might have committed shoplifting offence or something. How redeemed can someone be from this extraordinarily big, wide, long pattern of behaviour?
I think we have to hope that somebody can be. I think we also have to recognise that it is rare that it happens, but it does happen.
Yeah.
The tricky thing is, on the one hand, I'm sat here thinking, it's a shame that no Jewish organisations wanted to necessarily meet with this person.
I'd like to meet with him, but I'd love you to come on the show. Joshua Bonehill-Payne, come on the show, please.
Because actually we do need more examples of people who are able to move away from that sort of thing. But at the same time, I understand why a lot of Jewish people, Jewish groups, Jewish politicians would be exhausted and feel, actually, no, I don't want to do this because of the sheer wave of anti-Semitism.
Was there no one else better?
Yeah, but it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because at the same time, you have to hope, well, here is hope that you can reverse the tide of anti-Semitism that is growing in this country. But still, especially I think for somebody like Luciana Berger, for whom actually this was a very personal thing.
I mean, she left the Labour Party because of the anti-Semitism.
Well, that's exactly the point. That it wasn't just that it was part of, there was lots of anti-Semitism, there was also a very specific risk here, and a very specific sort of targeting. So I can understand that. But at the same time, you're right. We can't sit here and talk about the failures of the criminal justice system in this country, for instance, and its failure to rehabilitate people. And then when we find somebody who is rehabilitated, go, doesn't matter, cast them out of society. You have to hope that that kind of a person is not just turning to you and I and to other people who are respectable members of society and saying, look at me, but can also turn to other people who used to be that way inclined and say, there is a different pathway. But does that person need to be a counsellor? No, I don't think so.
Carry on doing your great work. Yeah. But again, he's certified by the Home Office to go into schools and things. But again, do I trust the Home Office or even prevent anyone to...
Certainly not prevent.
No, I don't. I'm sorry, I don't trust any of their judgment on this. Yeah. I'd really like to interview Joshua Bonehill-Payne. Come on the show. I know we put a bid in. The Conservatives, you can sort that out. If he wants to run as a councillor, be a public-facing role, he needs to be able to answer questions. I'm open-minded. I genuinely am open-minded. I believe in redemption. I believe in reform. I believe in second chances. But I also have a lot of sympathy for Luciana Berger, what she went through. And I think if this man had done any of this to me, or a member of my family, would I be going second chances?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. I mean, we often have, we have David Shipley on the show regularly. He's a fantastic campaigner on prison and criminal justice issues. Someone who he got done for fraud and he served time, and he's written very openly about that. And like he points out that Louise Haigh, the convicted fraudster, who's currently in charge of the country as the first Secretary of State, while Andy Burnham's on his holes. He's very, very clear that that she needs to be honest that she is a convicted fraudster. You live with that. That is part of your identity at that point. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of the stories we're talking about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. We'll get to some of your texts and your calls up next. This is Talk.
a week now spent learning the detailed ropes and the administration and all the problems that will face him a month or 6 weeks later on when events in the Commons, events elsewhere start hitting him. So I think he will come to regret it. I understand it's not just been in a job for a fortnight. He's fought an exhausting by-election. He was Mayor of Greater Manchester. So I understand why he's gone, but I just think practically he is making a mistake.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:28 is the time. Let's go to your calls. Stuart is on the line in Belfast. He's given us a call on 0344 499 1000. As you know, topics open, whatever you want to talk about. Stuart, what do you want to say?
Julia, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm absolutely raging to find out that Arnie Burnham's decided to take himself away on holiday. 2 weeks in the job, going on about all sorts of emergencies, whether it's prison, whether it's climate, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm speaking as an ex-military man. Whenever we were in the Army, 1995, December 95, we were told the Daytona Accord's been signed. You're deploying to Bosnia in early January.
Yep.
And that was Christmas. Christmas cancelled.
Yep.
Whole regiment. There you go. You need to get the tanks ready. Everybody's cancelled. 2003, serving in Iraq. We had one of the company commanders. Unfortunately, his wife was killed in a car accident.
Oh, gosh.
And he then came back. And for a week, seen his daughters back in Germany, and then came back out to Iraq because the job was that important. He felt a sense of duty to the men to come out and see what was done. And then Andy Burnham has taken over running of the country, and within 2 weeks has said, I don't have a holiday book, sorry, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely disgusted.
You know me, I'm a big defender of the holiday, and especially a family holiday, school holidays with the kids and his wife. I get that. But 2 weeks into the job.
Unbelievable, and even though they knew it was constructed for him, and they would do this, wait till the Parliament's dissolved for the summer, so then he takes over then, so he doesn't have to stand up and be scrutinised by the House of Commons at all. It's absolutely disgusting. So the man's is just shameless.
Yeah, I have to say, again, the Burnham bounce is mostly a thank God he's not Keir Starmer bounce, and I have to say, I think that bounce is going to be very, very, very short. Because he's already faced the reality. If you can't be a people pleaser all the time because you've got to make some decisions. Really appreciate your call, Stuart. Thank you very much. Graham's in Colchester. Graham, you want to talk about something. Again, this is something that Labour Party has in their manifesto, which is reducing the voting age to 16 and 17 as opposed to 18, what it should be, and still is at the moment. The warning that this could backfire in spectacular fashion with a whole load of Gaza independent candidates elected in largely Muslim areas.
Yes. No, I personally think it should be taken up to 20 or even 21.
Oh.
Yes. The main reason for that is it is a well-known and medical fact that teenagers, their brains don't compute things logically. And therefore, because their brains are actually rewiring themselves ready for adulthood. So that means they'd be very easy to brainwash, basically.
Well, they're definitely being brainwashed in the schools right now. I've got to disagree with you. I think, and then people say 13, it used to be you had to be a home, you had to be a property owner and things like that. And you get the left, you go, you need to have a degree to vote and things like that because they didn't like, Brexiteers who hadn't gone to uni, which is most people until very recently. I just think 18, I just find it really strange that you think that someone should be able to vote, but they can't, for instance, go and buy a pint in a pub. I think that's just weird.
It is, and they can buy cigarettes at 16. They can, but not allowed to get hold of pornography. It's just ridiculous, the whole thing. So maybe it should be 20.
Well, you'd agree to 20. Do you think, though, that they'll just quietly let this disappear away? There's plenty in their manifesto they're not bothering with. Plenty that Keir Starmer certainly brought in that had nothing to do with the manifesto. But do you think they'll just quietly let this disappear? Because let's face it, it was about basically getting Labour vote. They thought young people would vote Labour, and now they're discovering they might be voting either Green or Independent or, God forbid, Reform.
Oh, it's a foregone conclusion that Labour will do that. I wouldn't put any money on it. I wouldn't even give you evens on that one.
You think they're going to drop it?
Oh, of course they will.
Really interesting.
But I'll tell you one thing, I can't see Burnham lasting much past Christmas.
Oh, very interesting. I don't think they can get rid of another one. I think they've learnt that lesson from the Tories. Thank you very much indeed for that. Benedict Spence, Burnham lasting much past Christmas? I mean, his poll ratings,
I think he'll last past Christmas, but not much beyond that. I do think that we might actually be in a position where we lose the Prime Minister sort of before the year. Yeah, genuinely. I think that it could go very badly wrong. He's not prepared for those sort of structural issues that did for Starmer. Just very quickly, though, on the subject of changing the voting thing, I agree, we should raise it to 21, but you shouldn't base the argument on the development of your brain, because then it becomes very easy to make the argument about taking the vote away from older people, which I suspect Graham probably wouldn't like very much, because actually you do start to lose it as you get older, so that's a bit awkward.
Oh, God, it's all a can of worms here.
It really is.
Anyway, 11:33 start. We're going to take a quick break, and then we are going to be talking to the brilliant Maya Forstater of Sex Matters about, well, this year's silly season story about outrageously not letting men go into women's toilets. Whatever will they think of next? That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:35 is the time now. We've been calling this a August silly season story because it is quite absurd that we've had to have guidance on who can and cannot use women's toilets, men's toilets, women's changing rooms and men's changing rooms. But apparently we do need that because our country has become very, very silly lately. Let's talk about all of this with Chief Executive of Sex Matters, Maya Forstater. Good morning to you, Maya.
Hello, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. And we've been making light of this, but I mean, it is actually a very serious subject, but it is still also insane that we had to have a Supreme Court ruling in April last year, by the way, 16 months ago, telling us what a man was and what a woman was, and it's biological sex, not what you think today or what clothes you wear. But actually, formal guidance that comes into play today, 342 pages of it, which tells organisations when they have a public-facing toilet or changing room, so whether you are in a cafe or a leisure centre run by the council or whatever, that basically these single-sex spaces must be single-sex, organised along biological sex, i.e. the reality of sex, rather than what someone feels or thinks they are. I mean, it's taken a long time to get here, but is this the end of the road? Is everything done? We can say tick, job done, or are we still along that road?
It's definitely the end of the excuse that there's no guidance or we're waiting for guidance. I mean, this 320-page guidance, most of it's not about single-sex services at all. It's about other kinds of services. You know, disability is a big thing. Yeah. All other kinds of discrimination. There's only about a dozen pages that are about single-sex services, which, you know, you and I would think even that's a bit long.
Yeah.
But at least it spells
It's kind of one paragraph, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But what it gives people is clear examples. So if people kind of search around, they can usually find the example of a toilet, of a changing room, of a association for women and girls. And things that people have brought up as gotchas, like, oh, but you can bring a child into the changing room at the swimming pool. Doesn't that mean a man can come into the women's? And the guidance quite helpfully says, no, you can bring a child into the women's changing room. Doesn't mean men can come in.
Yeah,
so
something which we all knew to be true. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. There's so much nonsense out there, and this guidance puts a lot of that to bed.
Well, the trans rights campaigners, according to the BBC, say they've called the guidance unworkable. Is it unworkable?
It's unworkable if you're a man that wants to go into a women's changing room, because you shouldn't be in there. For everybody else, it's perfectly workable. There are two kinds of people, male and female, and there are three kinds of spaces, male, female, and unisex. If you've got a big building, you've probably got all three. If you've got a small building, you may not, and not everywhere is accessible to everybody, but most places are.
Yeah, and also we also have disabled toilets largely in places like that, and that can be used. And then people, trans activists take umbrage at that. I mean, sorry, but we can relabel it for easier, for access for disabled people in a wheelchair, if necessary, and people who and people who don't want to use a unisex service. It's a simple solution. It's almost like that solution was already there, and yet we're told millions of pounds is going to have to be spent sort of with new signage, and it's all going to change, and all this extra kerfuffle just because of difficult women like you and me.
It's absolute nonsense. The signs are already there. We see the signs every day. We know what the signs look like, male and female. All it needs is for an organisation to put something on their website, tell their staff, use common sense. There isn't need for massive building works. Like you say, most places already have an accessible toilet or an accessible changing room, and that's all you need for the few cases where people don't want to use the male or the female.
What do you say? I mean, there are two situations here. What do you say to someone who... Look, I do think we need to separate. There are men who pretend that they think they're women so they can gain access to women's spaces, to be predatory, because they get their kicks off, to be seen an awful lot on social media. It's basically a fetish. OK, those people, we definitely don't want them in our changing spaces or loos, because they're a danger to us, and it's creepy, frankly. But there are men who genuinely believe that they are born in the wrong body. It's not true, they aren't, but we should be kind, we should be respectful, we should be empathetic. What about those men? Now, I know you're saying, OK, they need to use the men's loo. If they are, and again, I think a lot of people, unfortunately, perhaps over-egg how easy it is to tell who is a man and who is a woman. But if they feel that they're dressed as a woman and they feel that they, in their view, pass as a woman, and they would feel intimidated by going into where there is only an option of a man or a woman's, what would you say to those men?
Use the unisex.
What if there is no unisex?
Go somewhere else. I mean, you and I know when you're a mum pushing a buggy around, there are lots of places you just can't go.
Yeah.
You go somewhere else. Not everywhere is suitable for everybody, but most places are, because we can't tell the difference between a cross-dresser and a man who really thinks he's a woman.
Yeah.
And when we can't look into people's souls, we can't look into their minds. Everybody knows what sex they are. Yeah. And in order to protect single-sex spaces for women, every man, however he feels inside of himself, however he wants to dress, whatever pronouns he wants to use, whatever name he wants to use, he has to stay out.
And what about the women who genuinely believe that they are born in the wrong body and that they are men, and who feel uncomfortable going into a women's changing room, or have had the cross-sex hormones, which mean they've got a beard and are dressing as a man, might look like an effeminate man to us, but never as a man. When they walk into a women's toilet, and women like me will go, "Oi, what are you doing in my loo?" What about those women?
It's difficult for them. I mean, they've made a life choice that makes it difficult for them to fit into women's spaces. And again, this is why it's a good idea that there is a unisex option, because if somebody, they don't necessarily want to have a conversation with everybody about their mental health, the surgeries they've had. I mean, that's their own business, but the way to keep that your own business is to not try and go into the ladies, is to use the unisex.
And the argument here, isn't it, is that if some people might feel uncomfortable, they might feel, there are people who are just, women or men who feel uncomfortable using public bathrooms at all. I mean, I know people who I would never use a public bathroom, but also the argument here is that these may be issues for certain people, but it's a tiny, tiny number of people. And it's not reasonable that 51% of the population should be forced to change their rights, their needs, their preferences, their dignity and their safety being at risk for the benefit of a few people.
Yeah, I mean, if you go out of your way to try and look like a man, it's going to be difficult to use women's spaces, and the people who sold them that medical treatment should have explained that to them. In the same way, you can't go to the airport and wave around a plastic gun. It still scares people.
Yeah, a very, very, very fair analogy there. What do you make of places like Lambeth? They've elected a Green council. The Green-led majority of the councils had a vote in the last few weeks, basically saying, calling on the council to not enforce these new rules if it was legally possible to do. They condemned the code as... I mean, I'm going to read this out, and I'm going to try and do it with a straight face, Maya. Wish me luck. The motion condemned the new code as, because they've had it since June, incoherent and... Oh, I can't do it. Incoherent and self-contradictory, discriminatory and impossible to implement in a reasonable and proportionate manner, and called for this code to basically, if it was lawful not to not be enacted. What would you say to them?
Well, they're going to F around and find out, aren't they?
Excuse me.
If they carry on like that, they'll end up in court.
I mean, if a council officer didn't enforce this and it was the law, they should be sacked, shouldn't they? If they're paid by public purse, if they're not enforcing the law, I don't get to pick and choose what laws I obey.
Absolutely, and if people are working in front of house, customer facing jobs, they ought to be able to rely on the policies and the instructions that they have from their bosses. This can't all be pushed down to the 18-year-old who's working on the gym reception to make a decision. This is at the level of the council decision makers, the high ups. They have to follow the law.
OK. Just finally, I want to ask you about the puberty blocker trial. Last Friday, we got the sad news, the High Court, that the judge was not going to block. There was an attempt by James Esses and others to try and stop the puberty blocker trial from going ahead, as basically completely immoral and unethical, which it clearly is, giving these very, very powerful drugs to children as young as 11 years old. They're recruiting for girls from 11 and boys from 12 as of this week for this puberty blocker trial. What do you make of the fact that that is going ahead and these drugs are going to be given to vulnerable children that will completely change their bodies?
It was very disappointing. I mean, this trial is not a well-designed medical trial to test these drugs. The way that they've justified this trial is saying it's harm reduction. It's stopping these children from getting these drugs on the internet. But that's not what the trial says it is. It says it's supposed to be testing these drugs. And the other thing is, when they assess which children are getting these, are they explaining to them that they will not be able to use opposite-sex toilets and changing rooms in school? They will not be able to play opposite-sex sport. We asked all of these questions, and the Department of Health and the trial designers said, we're sure that the children and families understand that, this debate has been played out in public, as if it's for the children to say what their expectations are.
And the children aren't reading The Guardian. They're looking at YouTube and thinking this is going to change their life. But also, it's not a randomised controlled trial, because by definition, you can't have some kids who are in the trial who are getting a placebo, because everyone will know they're getting a placebo because, they've either grown breasts or pubic hair or whatever. Yeah,
I mean, all they're testing is, are the children who get the drugs straight away happier than the ones who get them in a year? And in the short term, they will be happier. They've been convinced that these are things that their happiness depends on. They'll fill in the survey and say they're happier. But 10 years down the line, when they've lost their fertility, they've lost their sexual function, and they have a body that doesn't fit in either male or female categories, are they still going to be happy?
Absolutely. And the extraordinary thing that, you're not even allowed to give a full paracetamol to an 11-year-old. For goodness sake, you have to give them half a paracetamol up to the age of 12. But yeah, absolutely, let's push them full of how powerful drugs to change their natural bodies. Unbelievable. Again, it's obscene. I said earlier in the week, stuff. Joseph Mengele does it in a concentration camp. It was disgusting. Absolutely fine for King's College to do it, and the government to say it's fine. And I'm sorry, people are going to look back on this and they're going to be going, what the hell were people thinking? Maya Forshad, Chief Executive of Sex Matters, thank you so much, as always, for your fantastic work on this. Benedict Spence, your thoughts?
Well, I'm not even looking back on it and saying this is ridiculous. So I'm genuinely, perpetually bemused by the fact that this is still ongoing.
Yeah.
I've been listening to these conversations for years now, and we're still
about
not...
14, 15, 16 years into this.
Yeah, and we're still not yet at the point where this has just been completely junked, thrown out of the window, and people are being effectively hounded out for their role in pushing it. Because that is what's going to happen at some point.
No, people need to be in prison. We need to be very, very clear about that. 11:47 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. We're talking about what is going on with the Iran war. Is there a Strait of Hormuz deal? And how on earth will Ed Miliband go down in Washington? This is Talk.
A week now spent learning the detailed ropes and the administration and all the problems that will face him a month or 6 weeks later on when events in the Commons, events elsewhere start hitting him. So I think he will come to regret it. I understand it's not just been in the job for a fortnight. He's fought an exhausting by-election. He was Mayor of Greater Manchester. So I understand why he's gone, but I just think practically he is making a mistake.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. 11:50 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benedict Spence still here as well. I'm delighted to be joined by Elliot Wilson, Senior Fellow for National Security at the Coalition for Global Prosperity. Good morning to you, Elliot.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. We're told, and we keep being told these things, that there's a possibility of a deal for the Strait of Hormuz that could be announced as early as today or possibly tomorrow. This, as of course, Ed Miliband is heading to Washington, D.C. to meet up with his opposite number, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. What chances of a deal, and what would that deal look like?
Well, that's the question. I mean, there's probably a chance of some kind of cessation to the hostilities, because that's happened before. But the idea of a comprehensive deal is something that brings this conflict to an end, which is satisfactory from the American point of view, seems quite remote. Because, to be honest, I mean, the Americans have battered Iran quite successfully from a military point of view, but it doesn't really seem to have worked. So it's a matter of what each side is looking for and what each side is willing to accept.
Yeah. Well, indeed, so much of the debate over how to end the war seems to be presented on how to get Strait of Hormuz reopened. There's some talk, apparently, Washington officials are not even ruling out the possibility of some sort of operational fees of some sort being charged extraordinarily, not just by Iran, but by Oman as well, on the southern side of the Strait of Hormuz. But, I mean, this is not the norm in any other strait, in any other waterway, unless it's been, the Panama Canal, where, it's actually been built and you're paying for that service. This sets a very, very dangerous precedent for the rest of the world, if that is what is allowed to happen. And, of course, it gives immense power to Iran.
It does, and we have to remember that I'm not a rabid anti-war sort by any means, but before the war started, the Strait of Hormuz was open.
Yeah,
it was usable for trade and for oil and liquefied natural gas. So there is that problem that you can't have countries asserting rights over international waterways in the way that Iran wants to do.
Yeah.
Because if you say it's an incredibly dangerous precedent, it says to anybody with enough risk appetite to take on somebody like the USA to say, well, have a go, because it might get you into a better position than you were in before.
Well, also, we have a situation where Donald Trump keeps talking, I mean, all the weekend and early this week, talking about how, there was going to be this, again, biggest bombardments in the Second World War, all of this. But by all accounts, the Americans have now depleted their their ballistic missile supply. I mean, to the extent that it will take years to rebuild. Obviously, big concerns, of course, for Ukraine in terms of the supplies they get paid for by the European Union to deal with Russia as well. That America has massively depleted its forces. It may well have done a lot of damage to Iran, but the Iranian regime is still there. It's going strong, still in control of its people, and still a threat to the world.
Yes, I mean, the origin of the war, in a sense, was that the Iranian regime, which has always been an enemy of the West, in truth, since the revolution, had, got out of control. It had killed maybe 30,000 people of its own people. But we haven't really progressed from there. We've got maybe a more hardline government, and one that has demonstrated that it has no fear of Western retribution, because it's taken a tremendous military strike and it's still going. Which does raise questions over, sort of American power across the world.
Well, that's the problem with dealing with, a democracy fighting. And I don't think there's any case of any two democracies going to war with each other, which is something. But democracies going to war with totalitarian regimes, particularly theocratic ones like the Iranian regime. Well, you're dealing with completely different things. They don't care about how many people die. They don't care about, the cost of living for their people. Unfortunately, American presidents, British prime ministers do.
And, we have this massive mismatch in terms of willingness to take losses and take risks. And I mean, it's a good thing that we are appalled by military casualties. Yes. But, that plane went down a few months ago and there were 2 pilots in it. And there was a massive rescue operation mounted by Americans. That's great. But the Iranians could lose hundreds or thousands of people in a strike, and it wouldn't bother them at all. So there is that matter of, who's going to be willing to keep going longest.
Well, this is the issue, isn't it? And again, we absolutely want to have concern about civilian and indeed military losses. However, I do really worry that we have a real problem in the West, which is that we're not willing to sustain even a dozen casualties, even military, for any purpose whatsoever. All wars bad. Not understanding, though, some wars are necessary. And you think the number of casualties, the disruption to the world, including to our cost of living, world oil trade, if you did see Iran using their long-range weapons for a nuclear strike, that is perfectly likely to be something they would be willing to do. They are complete religious nutters, and they are a threat not just to their Gulf neighbours, including Israel and Arab Gulf states, but to the world. And yet there seems to be a complete lack of willingness and backbone and acceptance in the West that we're going to have to stand up to some of these tyrants.
I think the problem is that some forces, particularly on the left, have this idea that if we can just find the right formulation of words, we can find some sort of way of living with a state like Iran. And I don't think we can. Iran is a committed ideological enemy of the West. It's already causing problems for us. The Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament reported last year saying Iran is a major threat, both in terms of potential assassinations in this country and also major things like cyber hacking. This is not a country we can long-term do a deal with and be friends with.
Or trust a single word they say.
Absolutely. I mean, they could sign any agreement they like and they will have no qualms about going back on it. So it's very difficult to see exactly how you get to a sort of modus vivendi with these people.
Do you think that Ed Miliband, still bizarre, our Foreign Secretary, will be able to help? He's in Washington, D.C. to meet Marco Rubio?
I think the interesting thing about this appointment and about Andy Burnham becoming Prime Minister is that Andy Burnham seems effectively very uninterested in foreign policy, which is fine, and that's his choice. But it's very rare for prime ministers to have that, lack of interest. Usually, prime ministers get interested in foreign policy because it's big, exciting, and of course you go abroad and people aren't nasty to you, unlike being at home where they are. So it's whether Burnham is willing to step back and say, this isn't something that I'm particularly switched on to. The Foreign Secretary will do most of the legwork. and also the National Security Advisor, in which case Miliband does have a serious role. Or if it's all going on above his head, really it's just sort of meet and greet and trying not to cause offence and trying to put on a happy face wash.
Well, he was certainly President Trump said he was a man he could do business with, but I mean, they haven't even met yet. But it is interesting that, once again, we've got a foreign secretary, as we had with David Lammy, who's called Trump every name under the sun, racist, sexist, misogynist, whatever. And he said he'd lowered the bar for idiocy, which is quite something coming from Ed Miliband.
I think the problem is an awful lot of politicians, particularly on the left, thought they were saying things which would never come back on them.
Yeah.
And in a way you can understand that, because there was a time when the idea of Donald Trump as president was impossible to conceive of. But, you can't walk these things back, and the internet never forgets.
No.
All you can hope is that Trump sometimes forgets or can be distracted.
Yeah, also, Trump has said far worse about other people. Eddie Wilson, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Benedict Spence, just first of all, on the prospect of a deal with Iran, but then I'd love to come on to Miliband.
It's ironic, isn't this? Because, of course, by not committing ground troops, Donald Trump was hoping to avoid the idea of the forever war. But in a very real way, this has become more of a forever war than Iraq or Afghanistan did. Because, actually, they were able to topple the regimes in those countries. They've not been able to do that in this instance because they've not committed ground troops. And so what we have now is this weird dance where, what is this, the 40th time where Trump's come out and said, oh, a deal's very close, but if not, I'm going to bomb them back to the Stone Age. You're going to keep on having this weird dance. And the thing is, even if a ceasefire is agreed, there's another player in all of this called Israel, that if it decides, actually, we don't like the terms of this, they can unilaterally rip this
But again, it's not even we don't like the terms. We can't live because we can't be safe with the terms of this.
This was a forever war in the sense that it was an inevitable war, and we had already had all the proxy skirmishes that was the beginning of that war already, and it's been going on for a very long time. So in a bid to avoid the forever war, they've actually just brought one on in which they are less effective. But to talk about what Elliot Wilson was saying there about the lack of preparedness in Western cultures to tolerate casualties and to go, one pilot gets down, oh my word, it's a disaster. But of course, you already see Western war machines re-augmenting towards that through drone technology. Yeah. If public opinion hadn't shifted so firmly away from that, I don't know if we'd see drones being pushed out at current rates that we are.
Yeah.
So they are preparing for that.
And what do you make of it? Well, we could have robot wars, couldn't we?
Well, exactly.
China will win that one, judging by the technology.
Well, again, that's a large part of the issue there.
Exactly. And in terms of Ed Miliband?
In terms of Ed Miliband, listen, Foreign Secretary isn't a real job anymore. Mostly it's done by the Prime Minister, and that's just a vassal.
Case, apparently not.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, of course, we were talking about this being another example of somebody who said awful things about Donald Trump. Listen, left-wing people don't understand second and third cause effects. No. They say these things, and they genuinely...
they're doing student politics,
yeah, they genuinely have no concept of thinking into the future and thinking, how might this affect me?
Yeah, exactly. But there we are. Anyway, plenty more to come. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000. Up next, going to be talking to Trevor Kavanagh. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, watching on YouTube, or any of the other ways you can watch and listen, great to have your company. Thank you for joining us. If you've missed anything from the show, go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. If you hit subscribe, I can stop yapping on about it and you'll never miss a thing. Won't that work out well for all of us? Anyway, I'm with you till 1 o'clock. Delighted to say Benedict Spence, Conservative commentator, is still with us. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking more about those single-sex spaces and that that official guidance coming into force today. Badenoch defending the selection of a former neo-Nazi jailed for inciting racial hatred and basically horrific harassment of the former Labour MP Luciana Berger. She's allowed the selection of him as a Conservative council candidate and defended him on the basis that he's reformed and everyone deserves a second chance. But is this the right second chance? We'll also be talking about the rise in anti-Semitic incidents with Gideon Falter, and it's just been revealed. It's been revealed today the latest shenanigans involving the Cambridge professor Jason Arday. Scotland Yard investigated a journalist trying to expose the plagiarism row simply for writing emails to him. He, of course, claimed mental health issues over getting emails asking for basically proof of many of the claims he'd made. A complete Walter Mitty character, as far as we can tell these days. We'll be talking more about that coming up. As I say, Benedict Spence is here. We ask you to get in touch on all the big topics we're talking about. In particular, I was asking about Badenoch defending the Tories selecting a council candidate who was jailed for neo-Nazi activism. I mean, and numerous other things, by the way, assaulting a police officer included, saying he was reformed. What's your reaction? Because we believe in second chances, don't we? But is this the right second chance? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. Also, lots of your calls still coming in. Also about the early release of various violent offenders. Now we know more than 9,000 domestic abuse convicted felons will be released over the next 3 years. But also the single-sex spaces and that guidance finally coming into force. The likes of Lambeth Council saying, oh, might we try and actually not follow it? All that, love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Let's get straight to my next guest, though. He is Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun, and joins us to talk about all the big stories. Good afternoon to you, Trevor.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Must ask you, first of all, about Badenoch defending the selection of this former neo-Nazi as a Tory candidate. I've read out all the details a little bit earlier. I mean, I don't want to bore everybody by going through over them again and again. But we are talking about a guy who's been pretty nasty, very prolific online, writing some very horrible things, some misogynistic, vile, pornographic things about the former Labour MP, now peer Luciana Berger. And basically, I mean, he's even got a conviction for assaulting a police officer and other things. And now at 34, he is a changed man, apparently. He now campaigns and educates young people about, against, these sort of neo-Nazi views and against extremism and anti-Semitism. Is Badenoch right to say that we believe in second chances?
Well, I think that as Sir Humphrey might say, and yes, Prime Minister, it's a very brave decision. And I think that an awful lot of people will question it, not least, as you say, because he's actually served time in prison. Yeah. And not a small sentence. This wasn't a rap on the knuckles. I think he got 3 years.
3 years, and only in 2015. We're not talking about decades ago, for the anti-Semitic stuff online. 2 years more for harassing Luciana Berger, but he'd also has an historic conviction for assaulting a police officer and burglary of a police station.
Yes, and I mean, look, he was very young at the time, and he's now more than 10 years older. Yeah. And we do believe, I hope, in redemption. But nonetheless, we tend to criticise Labour and other parties, maybe even the Tories, for what they say about Islamists. So can you convert from being a terrorist Islamist to becoming a normal human citizen? The same applies to this. Can he suddenly switch from being committed to the point of being committed to jail, anti-Semitic campaigner? And what he said in terms of Luciana Berger were intolerable. And I think Hemi has openly admitted that what he said was unacceptable and vile. So when you try and square this circle, it is a little bit difficult to make the ends come together, isn't it?
No, indeed. And my guest, Benedict Spence, is making the point. No, OK, you can redeem himself, you get a second chance. You're not saying the man should be, you know, completely, you know, thrown out of life altogether. But is being a counsellor necessarily the way he needs to do it? Could he just carry on his good work as an anti-extremism campaigner?
Well, I think the problem is that each party has its own track record. I mean, Dennis Healey, who was a famous chancellor and moderate chancellor, if not right-wing in Labour terms, was a former communist. Jack Jones, who led the biggest trade union in Britain, the Transport Workers Union, was a paid member of the KGB. Yeah. So, you know, we have a lot of shadowy past. I'm not saying that in any way forgives them for their transgressions. And I'm not saying either that this man is now a clean skin who would be elected to public office.
Yeah, indeed. It is really a difficult one. I've certainly asked that we want to interview him. I'd love to speak to him myself. I suppose they would get the cut of his jib. This is Joshua Bonehill Payne. Certainly, Kemi Badenoch has suggested, you know, that the leaders of leading Jewish representative organisations meet with him and can talk to themselves to make a judgment themselves. They have declined to meet with this man, and I can understand that sentiment. Like, you know, really, of all the people in the world, you had to select this guy. Was he really the best candidate for the job? You could ask. But we'll leave that, and we're going to be talking more about that with Gideon Folter as well from the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Let's also talk about this announcement today, the coming into force today, of the guidance on basically who can use what toilets and what changing rooms and the like. And we spoke to Maya Forstatter earlier, and she pointed out that actually this big, 520-page document or 320-page document actually covers lots of different protected characteristics, other disability and the like. But basically, it makes it very clear the law is the law. It's always been the law. Codified and made very, very, very clear by the Supreme Court in April last year, so a whole 16 months ago, and that as of today it comes into force. The guidance is very clear that single-sex spaces are for people of the same biological sex and not what people think. So if you identify as trans and you're a man, you can't use the women's toilets, you have to use the men's toilets, or maybe use a unisex disabled toilet or elsewhere, and the same for women who identify as trans. It's all very simple. It's been reported by the BBC today that trans groups say that it's unworkable.
Well, look, we've almost made it unworkable ourselves as a society, haven't we, by giving an enormous amount of latitude to people who are born men and then pretend that they're women, and vice versa. So, this is a solution which was made and delivered by the Supreme Court back, as you say, last year. And you have to ask, why has it taken so blooming long to get to the point?
They're very slow typers. They're very slow typers, Trevor.
Well, women should be free to use women's only spaces. I can't imagine what it must be like to be in a state of undress, but a man standing there looking at you quite blatantly, and maybe doing more to show that he is actually a man.
No, exactly. What I find extraordinary, there are some, I won't name them, prominent figures on other radio stations who've said, I don't know what the problem is. I mean, people who come to my home and my family, my wife and I use the same toilet, and my male guests and female guests use the same toilet. What's the difference? You know them. They're not complete strangers. You've got a clue who they are. Presumably, you don't invite fetishists and sex abusers and rapists and violent criminals into your home to use your toilet at the same time as your kid. I mean, there's a really obvious reason. And this is something that, again, is laughable, is saying that this could be unworkable. Because it's worked for decades. For many, many, many years in workplaces, in cafes, in pubs, in leisure centres. We all knew where people were changing. And where people were going to the loo.
That was the days before human rights, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And before we could turn nature on its head and pretend things were otherwise than are irreconcilably as they are. And the comparison with domestic situations where guests arrive and use the same toilet as you, that's a very false comparison, but it's exactly the tactic that the left always use.
Don't they? Don't they just? Exactly. Now, I must ask you about another couple of stories. I mean, I haven't spoken to you since we learnt that Andy Burnham was 2 weeks into the job that apparently he's been desperate to get, when there's so much he wants to get done, and he's putting a plan together. Or doesn't apparently have a plan for anything really at the moment, as far as we can tell. Parliament not sitting, no scrutiny, no one able to question him. I don't see him doing big interviews where we're actually getting a proper scrutiny of what he's doing. But he's gone off on his holidays with his wife and kids. We believe that, you know, politicians deserve to have a family life. Kids of politicians also deserve to spend some time with their dad or their mum on holiday. School holidays are when they are. But going on holiday 2 weeks after taking the most important job in the country, is that a wise decision?
Well, maybe he should have had his holidays when he was still mayor of Manchester and before he completed his year-long campaign to become Prime Minister without a general election or actually any sort of election. Yep. I mean, if you come into the job, the most important job in the country, and decide to not do very much except waffle to a few chosen political journalists.
He went to Dover in a suit, Trevor. He's been busy.
I was very impressed by that. So, you know, basically it's a dereliction of duty. It's actually worse than that for both Burnham and for the Labour Party, because I think people are going to react very adversely to the idea that the newly highly ambitious Prime Minister promising change is mooting the sort of changes that we simply do not want, like allowing prisoners early release, and then disappearing on holiday. That is a very bad look. I think it's even worse and much more courageous, if you want to put it that way, than Kemi Badenoch appointing a former right-wing extremist.
Yeah, it is extraordinary, isn't it? He's also apparently might be rethinking this plan to have votes at 16 in England, already in place in Scotland, of course, I think quite wrongly. But basically, there's a warning, really, that we're looking at dozens and dozens of areas where the number of young Muslim voters coming onto the electoral rolls is bigger than the majority that Labour MPs have, often beating it by some 10,000. And that those young people are likely to vote for, along with their families and their local communities, for pro-Gaza independent candidates rather than Labour candidates. So the whole point, or maybe Green Party candidates, let's face it, the whole point of this policy was, yeah, we reckon that those 16 and 17-year-olds will vote Labour. Let's lower the voting age. Same reason the SNP did it in Scotland. Now it's looking like it might not benefit them that well, given these are the sorts of seats that would otherwise be Labour rather than, say, Tory or Reform. Do you think he's going to just quietly, if not backtrack on that manifesto commitment from 2024, but just sort of put it into the long grass?
Well, if it goes ahead and we have votes at 16, it's blatant gerrymandering, isn't it? And I mean, this is a government that wants to ban under 16, under 18-year-olds from using the internet.
Yeah.
But they're being trusted with our democracy, putting it in their hands.
Yeah.
And there is no qualification. He's also talking about compulsory voting. He's also...
I approve of compulsory voting. I think you have a duty as well as a right when you live in a democracy.
Up to a point. I think that if you have compulsory voting along with postal voting, you've got a real problem.
Yeah.
And I think that the other thing that he's thinking of doing is opening up the vote to European citizens. Well,
yes.
All of those are for one reason only, because they're seen as rich seams for Labour voting.
Yeah, but let's face it, I think a lot of us were really shocked in the local elections to discover that Commonwealth citizens from countries like Pakistan and India were allowed to vote in our elections. If they were long-term residents here, but not British citizens, whereas we don't have those reciprocal rights in those countries and frankly wouldn't want them. I find it quite extraordinary that anyone who isn't a British citizen is allowed to vote in any election. European citizens were allowed to vote in European elections only when we're in the EU, but this law has to be changed. It needs to be 18-year-olds, British citizens, full stop.
Look, if these voters were in any way remotely likely to vote Conservative, the law would be reversed.
Absolutely.
Don't worry. This is for one reason only, Julia. And we both know what it is.
Yeah, it is just extraordinary, isn't it? Just finally, I must ask you about Ed Miliband heading off to Washington, D.C. to meet with Marco Rubio's opposite number, the US Secretary of State. Lots of talk about, what is going on in Iran. We know, as pretty much most front bench Labour people have done, his predecessor David Lammy and Keir Starmer himself said horrible things about Donald Trump. I've got to be honest with you, even as someone who in the last presidential election would have voted for Trump by a long way over Kamala Harris, I think aren't necessarily untrue in terms of him being a misogynist and a racist and the like. But he's going to be, in Washington, trying to play nicey with the American officials after, like everyone else, slagging off their president. How do you think he's going to go down?
Well, I'm really rather looking forward to it because I think we can rely absolutely on Donald Trump to say exactly what he thinks about this man, who is,
Will he know who he is? He won't have to deal with him, will he?
Well, I don't think he'll be able to resist dealing with him, will he? I look at his track record on almost everything, from stabbing his brother in the back to the net zero thing, which is anathema to Donald Trump. And Donald Trump simply cannot keep his mouth shut. And I think that this is where two sort of gladiators who really deserve one another are going to be put in the same arena. And I think it's going to be fantastic.
The key thing to remember about Ed Miliband, he's not someone who just, spouts this stuff on the green stuff. He actually appears to completely believe it. He's a zealot.
Yes, and we're paying the price for his... we all are beginning to worry, or not just beginning to, there is now inescapable grounds for worrying about climate change. We're living with it as we look out the window. But it's the way you deal with it. Yes, it is, but you get extremes. But it's the way you deal with it. You can adapt to it.
Yes.
Or you don't have to clobber everyone, including ordinary taxpayers, but equally the big industries that actually keep our economy going, with the biggest bills for energy
No wonder BP looking at selling up and heading abroad. Brilliant. Yeah, let's not get any tax from them at all. Trevor Cabinet, great to talk to you, former political editor at The Sun. Thank you very much indeed. Benedict Spence, just come back on the climate change issue. I'm fascinated. We've very, very sensible folk like Ross Clark, who's written about all these things, saying, look, he does believe this is climate change. It may well be, he thinks mostly, as a result of, industrialisation, and things like that. Now, I'm sorry, I don't think there is actually evidence for that. There may be a small element from man, but the evidence is very, very clear. We've had far bigger shifts in temperature and far bigger shifts in tiny spaces of time. It's all geologically in ice patterns. This stuff is well documented. However, we're seeing the changes that happen when we've got a changing climate, because climates always change. Yeah. But particularly, we've been coming for in a very long period now, coming out of an ice age.
Well, part of the tricky thing with this is, and actually you can see it also reflected in how there was the response to COVID, which is that it's framed actually as a moral argument. Yeah. It is, the science says that it is man-made and that therefore it is morally wrong and therefore this justifies us with our political agenda going a different way. Rather than saying, listen, it could be several different reasons why, and let's dive down into the science of this, it is no. There is only one answer, this is what it is, and therefore it justifies our response, which is to take more control over removing your choice over how it is you live your life, where you get your energy from, where you get your food from. That's ultimately the question here. And for all I know, it could be entirely man-made, but the point is, it's being weaponized in order to push an agenda, which does not solve the thing, because if it did, we'd be talking about how to make it easier for people to work in extreme temperatures. Aircon, or manufacturing buildings.
Which countries deal with extreme weather the easiest? Wealthy countries. Yes. And there's no wealthy country without cheap and affordable
human history is actually human history is full of examples of us managing to adapt to suit the climate of the area. It's only in this...
It's why we can live... People can live in the Arctic and can live in the Sahara.
And yet, for some reason, in this country in particular, but also other European countries, the attitude is no, we must regress and we must go in an entirely different direction. Actually, if they were serious, they'd be talking about adaptation, they'd be talking about reinforcing energy grids so that you're not so reliant on fossil fuels, but that you're not waiting for the sun to come out and hoping that the wind blows that day.
But it is quite extraordinary, that. But also, again, even if it is entirely man-made, it's worth it because the Industrial Revolution is the reason why we live past 40 or 50 years old.
And it is how we will get the results. It's how we will get the solution to this. It's not by going back to the cave.
The Earth has been. We've seen when everyone. It's so frustrating. This is the highest since records began in 1880.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, in a lot of these temperature gauges, there's some very big question marks about some of the measurements that are given as well. It's definitely we've had a couple of 2 or 3 or 4 very, very hot summers. We have. And we'll probably get a load of cooler ones. And it doesn't matter whether it's hot, whether it's cold, whether it's rainy or it's dry. We will always be told it is down to climate change. The climate changes. But by the way, it is weather that changes every day or every year. It is climate. Climate is something that happens over a 30-year period. And everyone needs to stop using these terms. Whenever we get any weather that people like, oh, I'm really surprised by this, suddenly it's climate change. The reality is human beings adapt. And the Industrial Revolution has delivered the most amazing benefits for mankind. The Earth is greening, not dying. Food production has increased exponentially as a result of the Industrial Revolution, not declined. We can feed all the people on the planet and then some. People aren't dying of starvation or moving out of God-forbidden, God-forsaken basket case countries because of climate change. They're doing that because of civil war and totalitarian governments.
Well, the one example where a country decided it was going to get rid of fossil fuel-based fertilizers was Sri Lanka, and the crops failed, and the government was overthrown, and people were setting fire to government buildings. So actually, we have to be clear here. If your solution to climate changing, which, as you say, does, whether it's man doing it or whether it's doing it of its own volition, if your solution is let's row back on progress, you are not going to like the results.
No, exactly. Also, by the way, Miata van Bula, who is the new Energy Secretary, is even more of a zealot than Ed Miliband and has repeatedly written, whilst an adult and not a 13-year-old girl, I need to stress, about how we should move to net zero, not by 2050, unachievable, undesirable, impossible and unaffordable, by the way, but by 2030. Not just on energy, not just on electricity, but all energy. Literally, there wouldn't be a car, a train. You wouldn't have a fridge working. You wouldn't be able to get anywhere. We'd barely have any food. I mean, we are talking about insane policies. And she's a senior member of the government appointed by the Prime Minister before he went on his holidays. Good luck, everybody. 12:23 is the time. We're going to take your calls up next. Lots of you want to get in touch about Kemi Badenoch and that Tory councillor. Do you believe in a second chance or not for someone convicted of basically harassing a Jewish woman, Jewish MP, and basically being a neo-Nazi? He says he's reformed. Is this really the hill to die on, Kemi Badenoch? We'll talk about that. This is Talk. My father was born here, my mother was born here, I was born here, I consider myself British. People with exactly the same credentials, but maybe their family came from the Caribbean or came from India, but they have lived here 2 or 3 generations. They shared language, values, beliefs, integrated, assimilated generations ago. Why is they having babies? Why is that a threat to this country?
So, Julia, you are here acting as a mouthpiece for the regime that currently governs this country.
Shut up, Charlie. You're embarrassing yourself.
What you're saying is exactly the same thing I've been hearing for my...
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:26 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000. You want to get in touch about Kemi Badenoch defending the Tories selecting a council candidate who was jailed for neo-Nazi activism and then some, saying, look, he's reformed. We believe in second chances. What's your reaction? 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Let's talk to Martin, who is in London. Martin, what do you want to say?
Afternoon, Julia. How are you?
Very well, sir. Nice to hear from you.
Yeah, I think he should be given a second chance, or at least a hearing. I think the two Jewish organisations should at least give him a chance. Speak to him in person to see that he's rehabilitated. There are some people that have done awful things that you can rehabilitate, whereas there are others, like the Southport killer, whose name I will not mention. You can't rehabilitate somebody like that. They're a total lost cause. But some people you can, rehabilitate them, and I think he should be given a chance.
OK, but a second chance at society, as in, like, spent convictions. He was young. He says, he's now doing work. I mean, again, if he just says, oh, I don't believe in that anymore, if he is now, if a lot of his work is he volunteers and he actually goes into schools and campaigns against anti-Semitism and extremism, I mean, that is a very good sign of redemption. But does that necessarily mean he should be selected as a Conservative council candidate?
I can see why people might think that, but sometimes you could just give him back by working as a local councillor. It's also
or does he want to have a political career, and this is the first stepping stone? Not everybody who stands as a councillor is giving back. I mean, have you met some of your local councillors?
I'm with you on that, but we also need to remember there are people in the House of Lords that have been to prison. So they walk around now with their knighthoods and their lordships.
Yeah,
so
I have a bit of a problem with that. Yeah.
So it's either a unified rule, or we got what we have now, which is a total mess. But I do think the two organisations should at least hear him out. And if after that, having seen him face to face, they think, we're not too sure about this guy, then fair enough.
Very, very interesting. Thank you for that call, Martin. Thank you. Let's go to Vernon, who's in Staffordshire, and I think has a rather different view from Martin, don't you, Vernon?
Oh, just a little bit, Julia, just a little bit. For me, hell no. I wouldn't give anybody a second chance.
Anybody?
No. How about we be decent from the beginning? Particularly someone...
Well, no, hold on a minute.
Government office.
When I was 15 years old, very foolishly and wrongly, I stole something from a shop and got caught because I'm apparently a rubbish arch criminal, and got caution. I have to say, I mean, I used to have nightmares. I was so mortified and embarrassed, and typical that I would get caught. I genuinely, first time, everyone else I knew was shoplifting, first time, dared to do it, and got caught. And I'm really glad I did, because it scared the living daylights out of me. But do I deserve redemption for what I did at 15?
Julie, with respect, you were a child then at 15 years of age.
What if I'd done it at 24? I mean, what was it?
No chance. No chance. He's a grown adult. Sorry. Our kindness in the United Kingdom is killing us. We have such weakness. For me, it's black and white. It's really simple. You do the crime, you do your time, and there is no chance that you can ever be in a position of power that maybe dictate the way forward that our stupid, pathetic, weak country. We're in such a mess. We're in a mess because we've got weakness.
Okay, but you say he can be redeemed as in he can get a job, but it's being a councillor, it's being an elected representative with power that is your problem.
Massively. These are so-called the beacons of society. I mean, in my opinion, they're absolutely not. If you look at House of Lords, I've never seen such a pathetic bunch of individuals in my life.
I think there are some great people. I mean, I disapprove of the House of Lords. I'm a Democrat, but in terms of some of the people in there, they're absolutely brilliant. I'm very happy you've got the likes of Claire Fox and Kate Hoey and Toby Young and some other great people in there who are trying to fight the good fight for our freedoms.
If the House of Lords closed tomorrow, Julia, I wouldn't shed a tear. I think it's a pointless organisation. It's just a situation where £300 a day to have a little sleep in the afternoon.
Well, no, I mean, there are some that take the mick. But, well, hold on. House of Lords is basically the reason why they've managed to stop that absolutely horrific, bungled assisted suicide bill. That, if it wasn't for them, that would be law now.
Yeah, well, you know, again...
They did their job.
To me, we've got government ministers who are not fit for office. Let's start at the very beginning. You've got this Louise Haigh, this ridiculous redhead fraudster. I mean, come on. Where are the standards? You know, you're a fantastic orator, journalist, Julia.
God bless you.
Best in your industry, do a brilliant job, and you're accountable. How is this lady now running? She's actually in charge of the UK. I'll give her...
Well, no, but she's an MP. She is accountable.
Well, is she? But how she become an MP?
Oh, because she stood for election. That said, when she stood for election, her constituents didn't know that she was a convicted fraudster.
Well, there you go. That's the problem, isn't it? She hasn't been honest, or someone hasn't been honest. I mean, the reality of it is those in public office should be the beacons of society, not the scumbags.
All right. Well, there you are. Vernon's told how he thinks. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Thank you very much, both those calls. Very different, Martin and Vernon. Phil says, at least... in terms of the Tories defending Kemi Badenoch, Phil says at least they know about his history and can monitor him, unlike the Labour lot who just seem to let anyone join, no matter what their thoughts or beliefs. David said, seems like it's unnecessary drama, shouldn't have picked them. Fred said, I care more about the fact we have a convicted fraudster running the country. That's Louise Haigh. Ian says she'd be bouncing off the walls and the ceiling if Reform UK had done this. This is Kemi Badenoch. And Linda says, Kemi was doing so well too. Massive mistake on her part. The public won't forgive her for this. And Yasmin says, I bet Nigel's glad it's not him for a change. Ha, ha, ha. And Arthur says, lost all credibility with this one. Well done, Kemi. Well, interestingly, we got our next guest, is the Chief Executive of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, Gideon Falter. Find out what he thinks of that appointment, and also the appalling rise in anti-Semitic incidents revealed in the latest set of figures. And we'll talk to him about that. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:34 is the time. Well, let's speak right now to Gideon Falter. He's Chief Executive at the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Thank you for joining us, Gideon.
Hi, Julia.
Obviously, I want to talk to you about this alarming rise in anti-Semitic incidents, but also specifically, obviously, previous anti-Semitic incidents that are in the news very much over the fact that this former neo-Nazi, Joshua Bonehill-Payne, has been selected as a Tory candidate for a local council in Somerset, not as an MP, as a local councillor. 34-year-old now campaigns against extremism and anti-Semitism. Kemi Badenoch has defended his appointment, saying, you know, he's done appalling things in the past, but we believe in second chances. He was jailed for 3 years in 2015. He posted anti-Semitic comments online promoting a planned anti-Jewification march in Golders Green, a poster with an image of Auschwitz saying the rally would be an absolute gas. Absolutely horrific. 2 years He was a year later, he was sentenced for a further 2 years, guilty of harassing Luciana Berger, the then Labour MP, now a baroness, who's Jewish. Some of the most foul, misogynistic, pornographic, disgusting anti-Semitic abuse. He's also founded the National British Resistance, a far-right group. He's got an historic conviction for assaulting a police officer and burglary of a police station. On the face of it, an extraordinary choice to be a local council candidate. Kemi Badenoch says, though, he's reformed. She suggested that leading Jewish representative organisations should meet with him and speak with him to see for themselves whether he is a redeemed character. Would you be willing to meet with this man? Do you think he should have been selected as a candidate?
You know, I remember Joshua Bonehill paying pretty well. Around 2015, he was organising these anti-Jewification marches through areas with a Jewish population in London. And we went to considerable lengths at Campaign Against Anti-Semitism to see to it that he did go to prison. And so we would be very much against someone who holds anti-Semitic views being elevated to a position of power, whether it's as an MP or as a councillor or anything else.
If he doesn't hold those views anymore.
But that's the point. If they still hold anti-Semitic views.
Yeah.
And we don't know what's in his heart. I don't know what's in his heart. But we do know that in recent years, he seems to have gone to considerable lengths to try to educate against anti-Jewish hatred. And the entire point, surely, of the criminal justice system, of making sure that people are punished for their offences, is not just to deter them, but it's also to offer them a chance to reflect on what they've done and be rehabilitated. And I think that if someone works very hard to counter the anti-Jewish hatred that they once sought to spread, we should all consider that a success. Mm-hmm. And like I said, we don't know what's in his heart, but we are very much keeping an open mind on this one.
The Joint Board of Deputies and the Jewish Leadership Council have both refused the invitation to meet with him. They've declined that. They said they declined the invitation to meet with a former neo-Nazi with criminal convictions for anti-Semitic hatred. They say the severity of his crimes targeting Luciana Berger and others mean he still faces ongoing legal restrictions. They say, whilst we do believe in the possibility of rehabilitation, this should not in this case entail selection as a candidate for a political party, and the impact of this decision on the victims ought to be a central consideration. They're going to meet with the Conservative Party to discuss it. Would you be willing, and you already know who this man is in detail, would you, representing the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, would you be willing to meet with him?
Look, I'm not really sure what the meeting would do, because at the end of the day,
I suppose you get the cut of someone's jib. You can see better into someone's heart or soul by when you meet with them about how they talk about their views.
I don't see a problem particularly with meeting with him. I don't think it would give me a massive insight into what's truly in his heart. You know, people can fake it. But at the same time, if someone has spent years trying to undo some of the wrong that they did, then surely that is a good thing. Surely that's the kind of outcome you want to have when you make sure that people face the consequences of their actions. And look, there's something which I think is very important here, which is that we cannot surely have a completely closed mind about this. And the people who are ultimately going to make the decision will be voters who this person is put in front of. And I don't believe that every political party should put up whoever they want into positions to be elected. Yep. But surely this is a very different case to someone like Kanye West, for example, who is constantly putting out, a year ago, putting out a new song called Heil Hitler, taking out a Super Bowl advert slot to advertise his new swastika T-shirts. And then as soon as he wants to go on tour, he's saying, "Oh, I'm really sorry about the anti-Semitism. Now come and give me money at my shows." I think that's a very different situation. Yes. West is a constant roller coaster of vehement Hitler-loving anti-Semite, and then the next minute he says that he didn't really mean it and that he should have taken some different medication and he's really sorry, and then he does it again and again. That's very different to someone who over 10 years ago was an absolutely horrendous anti-Semite. And let's not understate this.
No.
Joshua Bonehill Payne was an absolute breath of fresh air in the far-right neo-Nazi movement. This was largely a movement which was old men who were absolutely vile, sort of the old sort of dirty raincoat mob of the British National Party and the National Front and that kind of milieu. And into it comes Joshua Bonehill Payne, young man coming up with some really vicious stuff and inciting people and actually making sure things were happening on the ground, like these anti-Jewification marches that he was trying to run. He was a pretty vile individual. And of course, then there's the stuff that he was sending to Luciana Berger. Yep. There was also the stuff that he was sending whilst he was in prison. He was receiving fan mail and he was corresponding with people. He seemed to be quite enjoying it.
Yeah.
The man that we are seeing now claims to be a very different man who has spent a lot of time thinking about what he's done and trying to undo some of that wrong. I think that we should keep an open mind.
Very, very interesting. Really appreciate your thoughts on that. Let's also talk about these latest publication of the just horrific spate of anti-Semitic attacks and assaults that we've seen. Nearly 2,000 anti-Semitic incidents being reported in the first 6 months of this year, particularly in the wake of the Iran war and the Golders Green stabbings. Basically a spike in incidents from 1,926 recorded from January to June. Assaults, arson attacks, threats among the incidents recorded by the Community Security Trust. And the total is up by a fifth on the first half of last year. Now, we saw a massive spike in the wake of the horrific October the 7th attack. And it is extraordinary that whenever Jews are the victims of attacks, or Israelis the victims of attacks, anti-Semitic attacks go up still further. We saw that in the wake of the Manchester synagogue attack in which 2 men died. What's your reaction to these statistics?
It's very clear that anti-Semitism in Britain is now out of control. It is a national emergency. And when you look at these statistics, there are some statistics within the statistics that are particularly shocking. For example, that physical attacks, not only are attacks up in general, but the number of those which are physical attacks is up by 82%. If you look at the attacks in schools rising by 59%, that's horrific. These are our young people, our next generation, attacking Jews in schools.
But it's a particular issue among young people, isn't it?
It massively is. It massively is. And we're seeing young British kids being brainwashed, and those who are brainwashed to hate Jews and position their worldview around it are not just hating Jews. These kids are being brainwashed to hold all sorts of extreme radical positions, including against this country and other groups of people, including Britain in general. Many of them are ashamed of and disgusted with Britain. It's a very, very worrying development. And when you look at how it's affecting the Jewish community, we've done polling that shows that 61% of British Jews have considered leaving the country over anti-Semitism in the last 2 years. A similar number are now disguising their Judaism when out in public. They're hiding they're trying to hide the fact that they're Jewish when out and about. This is a national emergency where not only are we now having to dedicate specialist policing to keeping Jews safe in Britain, which should be an enormous source of shame for the country that stood firm against Germany. But it's also something that I think the Jewish community doesn't want. We don't want the country to be spending £250 million over the next 3 years in extra policing for the Jewish community. But what has got us here is unfortunately this two-tiered justice and appeasement of extremists, and the fact that for years now we've been paying tens of millions to sort of babysit these Palestine marches instead of going into them and pulling out from amongst their number these people who are inciting hatred, instead of getting the Charity Commission to fulsomely and fiercely go after some of these mosques where we've seen extremists preaching absolute blood-curdling calls against Jews. And unfortunately, the government has now, it's got to a stage now where the medicine is getting increasingly tough to take. to actually deal with these extremists in our midst.
Well, they're scared to deal with it. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, one thing you didn't mention there was the non-stop, absolute lies pumped out by the BBC and other mainstream media. We know with all the authority of the BBC about, genocide in Gaza, deliberate targeting of civilians, and the totally sort of unjustified war. Like, what on earth is Israel doing bombing Gaza or even, southern Lebanon? I mean, this is blatant. The mass starvation as well that apparently took place. Not only is there no evidence for this stuff, there is complete evidence that these things did not happen. These lies are still perpetrated. Lots of people, particularly young people, I've got really good friends who I think of good people who genuinely believe that that is what has happened, and that translates into horrifically anti-Semitism in this country.
We just had our new Prime Minister. One of his first interviews that he gives is to Gary Lineker, who was fired from the BBC after reposting an image on Instagram.
For legal reasons, I'm going to have to say he left the BBC. I have to, for legal reasons, say that.
He left early, put it that way, for posting a video about Zionists, which was illustrated with a rat emoji. Andy Burnham goes and gives his first interview to him. Gary Lineker starts talking about a genocide, and Andy Burnham doesn't push back at all. And I think what everyone's got to recognise is Britain is practically irrelevant in the Middle East. We have no power, we have no real say, and all of this political grandstanding and obsession with Israel and the one Jewish state in the world is having no effect over there. But what it is doing is it is fanning the flames over here and contributing to this massive rise. And when you look at the statistics that are out today, the war in the Middle East is used as an excuse for about 41% of these incidents that we're seeing now. We're fanning the flames here. It is being used as a means of driving young people in this country into the arms of the extreme left, of the Muslim Brotherhood, of various different extremely nefarious organizations and individuals that are prevalent here and which we are doing not a thing about. Britain needs to focus on the danger on its doorstep, not some conflict we have nothing to do with thousands of miles away.
Absolutely. Gideon Falter, great to talk to you. I wish again, as always, was under happier circumstances from the campaign against anti-Semitism. Benedict Spencer.
I think that sort of discussion about the uptick in anti-Semitism is very interesting because it informs the attitude of many people towards the case of the man standing to be a Conservative councillor. I think that was a very good example of somebody talking about actually how it is important to recognise that people can change their positions, and that's very important. But you can understand why of all communities in the UK, the Jewish community might be the most fatigued and the least inclined to actually go, fine, we'll talk to this guy, because they get it on all sides all the time.
Now. Yeah, exactly. 12:48's time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about the police and why, for some reason, they thought it was a good idea to investigate a journalist who tried to expose the, let's face it, Walter Mitty-style Cambridge professor Jason Arday. We're going to talk about the latest on that with Rafe Haydel-Mankiw up next. This is Talk.
we've been on the beaches for 2 days running. Both days we've been hassled by the local French police. They've turned up armed to the teeth, looking very aggressive. We've had to arm ourselves actually with gas masks. They're checking our ID, wanting to know what we're doing here. They should show as much enthusiasm, I think, with the migrants. They seem to be waving them through and hassling us. But this morning, they asked for my ID. I told them to clear off. I said, you got it yesterday. You're not hassling me on the beach on my morning stroll.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. I tell you where we've not seen any common sense lately, and that is at Cambridge University with the appointment of the Professor Jason Arde, the youngest black professor at Cambridge Cambridge University. What's extraordinary, though, is it does appear that pretty much his entire CV and pretty much every other claim he's made about his life is, for legal reasons, should we say, unverifiable and unverified. And certainly we've now got 3 different education institutions where he's claimed that he has some sort of qualification from or some sort of standing appointment, saying absolutely not, they've never even heard of him. And now we've got the latest revelation about this man, which is that police investigated a journalist, sent a police officer to a journalist who was trying to expose a plagiarism row involving Jason Arde. And Jack Grove, a reporter for Times Higher Education, was accused of harassment after he emailed questions to the professor about his academic record. An extraordinary state of affairs. No charges were ever brought, but the fact that any police officer was sent to or even contacted this man, frankly, should be a sacking offence. Let's talk about all of this with Rafe Hadel-Manku, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. Good afternoon to you.
Hello, Julia. What a story.
I have to say, I started reading the story last week and I was going, well, this sounds an interesting character. Plagiarism row, and a lot of reminiscent of the Harvard president. But actually, I'm sure you know all the details. Give us just a brief summary of all of the things that this incredibly impressive young man has apparently done in his life, both academically and his athletic achievements as well.
Well, Jason Arde should wear a cape because he's clearly a superhero,
it's
given
amazing.
his feats of brain and brawn. I mean, this is a man who wasn't just the youngest black professor in history. He was a mute till the age of 11, illiterate till the age of 18, then, of course, got his PhD, claims to have been a visiting professor at Glasgow University and Ohio State University in America and another university, all of whom have no record of him being a visiting professor. He claims to have been sent abroad by a charity that never sends people abroad. He claims to have appeared in a famous documentary series for which the basic requirement is to have been alive 20 years before he was actually born. He claims to have run 600 miles in 6 days originally, later extended to 12 days, something which would put him in the elite rank.
For charity?
For charity, for whom he raised £5 million on his own originally.
That was for the 30 marathons in 35 days.
Yes, for 30 marathons in 35 days. And on the side, he was a semi-professional football player. I think they need to make a film about this guy's life. You know, it should rank alongside Forrest Gump and being
absolutely.
There.
Well, you missed out. You missed out. Now, this is the glorious thing that he got his PhD despite 2 weeks before having to do his oral exam, his Viva, for this PhD, which he got, as you said, after being illiterate until the age of 18, and he got it 2 weeks after having surgery for a brain tumour. Which led him to forget his entire PhD work, and he had to basically learn it again within 2 weeks. This man is truly a medical, athletic and intellectual, sporting and whatever giant, isn't he? This is the thing. It's all come about because some rather sort of disgruntled fellow professors at Cambridge University went, this guy is being like feted as the best thing since sliced bread. Does he actually have the qualifications that he claims to have? And they started looking at what he'd written in his PhD, claiming that actually there are a huge number of passages which are clearly lifted from another PhD written by someone completely different years earlier. This big plagiarism row has exploded as more and more people are looking into his back life and every claim he's made. And yet we've got a whole load of Cambridge professors and, you know, the great and the good, the lanyard-wearing types, the Jolyon Morn and others, Good Law Project, who've all signed a letter supporting this man and basically hinting that we're all just nasty racists and that's why we're attacking this man.
Well, this is what's remarkable, because it's actually exploded the DEI for the nonsense that it really is. And it sent the humanities departments reeling because it's really exposed the ludicrousness of these faith-based theories that people study. Critical race theory was his, but you can put in gender ideology where you can teach it without having any noticeable skill or talent at all. And, you know, and what's curious, though, is that without checking whether his claims were true, all of the great and good have decided to risk their reputations by supporting him. And they've circled the wagons around him. You know, people like James O'Brien and LBC, Krishna Guru Murthy, people who are, you know, naturally skeptical journalists who are used to smelling things when they're fishy. But here they were like sort of train spotters when they see the Flying Scotsman. You know, this was a virtue signaling version of the Flying Scotsman. He ticked every box: race, poverty, illiterate,
disability,
neurodivergent. So they couldn't let him go down. They had to essentially circle around him because he was their sacred totem. And Cambridge University has refused, even though it has a zero tolerance on plagiarism, it's refusing to examine this, saying it's up to Liverpool University to do that. If this was a white professor, you can bet your bottom dollar they would be investigating him.
But it's extraordinary, because so many of these claims have been made not just publicly, but in national broadcasts, repeated again and again and again, whether it's, you know, 5 million, I think at one point went up to 5.5 million claims. There are charities that have had, I don't know, 10, 15 grand in terms of money that being raised by this man. There is nobody saying where this money came from. No one who witnessed any of these sporting achievements, by the way. No one who's seen a big cheque being handed over to a charity. I mean, even just down to things like that, which perhaps don't matter as much as lying to get a job. But what's even more sinister is Scotland Yard basically investigating a journalist who was quite legitimately, as a reporter of the Times Higher Education magazine, asking questions and sending emails to this professor, and these emails are always publicly available on universities' websites. Can you, these claims have been made about you. Can you please verify? And being told he was harassing someone who was having mental health problems. That's an absolute outrage.
Yes, up to this point, it's been quite amusing, in a sense of schadenfreude, to see these woke universities and the woke establishment embarrassed and humiliated for supporting him. But my gosh, I was flabbergasted when I saw this, that the police are now investigating the fourth estate. You know, journalism is one of the great institutions. The free press is vital. And of course, of all the publications in this country, is there anything that's more bland and politically correct than Times Higher Education? This is not the Daily Mail, the Daily Star we're talking about. And their job is to investigate educational issues. And there is nothing wrong with asking questions. And then Jason Arday himself employed Carter Ruck, the bulldogs of the libel world.
Very expensive as well, I understand.
But there's another question here, which I think is even bigger.
Well, you're going to have to be very quick. I mean, I've got 10 seconds left.
How many other Jason Ardays are out there? People who aren't